Hey everyone, and welcome back to the another phase of our complete React course. So we received some great feedback on our first phase, and thank you so much, and I'm really grateful for that. So in the phase 1, we covered some of the crucial concepts of the React in depth, like state, components, hooks, and some projects along with that. So, taking that journey forward, now the phase 2 is out and it covers a lot of important and a bit advanced concepts of React for building real world applications with the React. And here also, we'll be creating the amazing React projects with using the context, Redux, with using the custom themes, and you will learn some performance optimization hooks as well. So if you haven't watched the phase 1, go check it out, and if you already have some knowledge or the basics of the React, then you can enroll in this course and it would be a great investment of your time. So without wasting much time, let's get started with the phase 2 and I'm super excited to bring you back. So welcome again. So now let's move on to the next phase of our tutorial, and the first concept that we are going to cover is the context API with the React. So what is the context API? So context API inside the React is a feature that allows you to share the state between components without having to pass the props through each level of your component tree. So what does this mean? So with the context API, you can share the state without using the props because it solves a problem called the props drilling. So the problem statement for using the context API, so it solves the prop drilling, which we are going to discuss in a moment, where the props are sent to a deep level of components. So what I'm going to do is I will just show you an example with the React. So here we have the app.jsx. So here what we are doing is first I will remove this. So here what we will do here, you can see first we have a piece of state of is logged in. And suppose we are getting this from an external API, or we have made an HTTP request to backend and then we have the get is logged in property over there. So with the help of this, we can fetch if the user is logged in or not. So inside this application, what we are doing, so here we have the render screen component. We can open the render screen, and after that you can see inside the render screen, we have the property of the is logged in, which we have passed through app component. And from there we have some content, that's a basic content. Then we have the screen component, and again we have used the is logged in property to be sent to the screen component. And again the screen component is using the is logged in property, and you can see here we have the is logged in property inside the screen. So if we have the is logged in property, then we are displaying like welcome user or welcome to our application. But if we don't have the is logged in property, we are displaying the form for user to be logged in again. So let's move on to the application that we can see. So first we have welcome to our application, it's good. But what if the user is not logged in? Suppose we have the false over there, then we will be seeing the form like log into our application, and this is the form for that, the user ID and password for that user. So this application looks okay, right? This application looks okay, but the structure of this application is not okay. And why? Because you can see here we have a piece of state at the top level of our application. So is logged in is at the top level of our application, and you can see the is logged in is shared between multiple and nested components. So it is being used inside the render screen as well. So inside the render screen, we have the is logged in property, which is shared. And again, the render screen can use the is logged in property, or it cannot even use. And the same property is being sent to another component called screen. And here we have the screen component, which is using the is logged in property. So the problem here is this is logged in property is shared into this component as well and into this component as well. And in future there could be multiple components where you share the is logged in property, because it is very crucial property inside web development. So suppose you have some protected content, suppose you have the application like Amazon, right? So if you are the is logged in, then the Amazon will not show you the login link over there. right? So suppose you have the navigation bar over there, right? And suppose you have the main content, like if you have the main content over there, you have the main, and again you will be having the is logged in property. And suppose you have another content, you have the orders property like this, you have the orders, you send the is logged in property, and you have the cart as well, you can have the application cart over there like that, so you have the cart, and again you have the is logged in, and you can have the help section as well. And there could be another section of, we can have suppose the logout screen, so we can have the logout over there. If you are logged in, then only we need to show the logout. So there could be as many number of components as we want, but you can see the problem is we are sharing only one piece of state between multiple components. That could be render screen, and inside the render screen we also share the is logged in to a nested component as well, the children as well. So the render screen is a child of app, and this screen is child of render screen, and one piece of state is being shared to the child and another child of that child. So that could be a huge problem, and that is what the props drilling is. So if we move on, so I've prepared a diagram for you. So the props drilling is a concept in which one piece of state is being shared to many components, like is logged in. If like once we send the is logged in property to the home screen will show different content according to this property. Same according to navbar. If the user is not logged in, then the navbar will not show you your account details, or suppose getting your orders, getting anything with that. And the main content will be different once you use the is logged in property. The dashboard will be different if you use the is logged in property. So one state, one piece of state is being shared to many components, and this is just a basic diagram. This is a diagram of very basic application, and the applications like Amazon requires a lot of components because there are a lot of modules. So one piece of state is being shared to many components, that is known as the props drilling. So with the help of context, we can solve the props drilling. So what we do, we just add a wrapper. So what is a wrapper? So we can add some wrapper like this. So that could be a wrapper over there like this. And inside this wrapper, there could be some piece of state which is used for, suppose for a module. Suppose for the order section, we share a piece of state, and the state could include a couple of things. We could have one component, one layout component. It's a type of layout component which renders another component as a child. So it is a wrapper. So one wrapper has this piece of state. So the app component can use this state, and inside the app component there are a lot of modules that it can use. So with the help of the wrapper, we don't share the data via props, but instead we use a hook of the React which lets us use the values directly from the wrapper. So that's it about the context API. That what it is. So context API will have some state at the top level, will act as a wrapper, and then you can use the state. You can also use some state variables, update them and all with that, and you don't need to pass the props over there. But instead, suppose this is a children and you want to get the property of the is logged in, so you can just use const is logged in equals to get from the wrapper, and you will get this property. And inside any deep nested level component, you can do that. You don't need to get the props, you just get it directly from the context, from the wrapper. And that's it about the context. So with the help of context API, we can use a wrapper called context. We can create a context, and we can also create the separate context for, suppose for the theme of the application, suppose for the login, suppose for the orders, suppose for the products, and suppose for, we can have for managing the state, for managing the application cart and all. So a context API is very useful to manage the application wide state. So we can have global state management with the use context as well. So we just add a wrapper at the global application, and then the whole application can use our state. That's it. And now I know that now you are a bit confused about the context API. but I will simplify everything for you because it's a huge concept and initially it's right to get confused. So now let's move on to another slide, and again we'll learn about the problem statement. So the thing that we discussed over in this diagram and even inside this application, first I remove this. So the things that we discussed over there are real world problems, that if you are building the real world applications, a big application, then how you can manage the state. So we can have the cumbersome code. Suppose if we share the props across multiple components, multiple nested components, so one component use that, other component, if that component doesn't use that, and it shares to another child and their child shares to another child, so that could be a chain of components in which the is logged in property is being shared. So that's not a good code, and it can have the maintenance challenges as well, like the maintaining the props and all. And the props are immutable, so you cannot change the value of the props, so they are immutable, and there could be the maintenance problems of how you can maintain your code. And another thing, there could be a performance concerns as well, like one prop is being shared to many components, so there could be a huge performance issue in updating those virtual DOMs. So these are the problem statements for that. And now let's move on and let's see the benefits of using the context API. So we can have the wrapping of components. We can wrap the components with the help of context API. We can use that for the application by state management. And again, we can have provider. So provider is at the top level of the context API, which manages the complex task, and it manages the state, and that state is being used to the children's. So these are the benefits of using the context API. And now let's move on and let's implement that. So here what I'm gonna do is, first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just have a separate branch for the context API. So here we can just move on and we can just have, I think what we can do, we can just undo these changes over there. We can undo these changes, and we can also move on, and what we can do, we can create another branch. We can create another branch, and inside that branch we can have the context API over there. We can have the context API over there, and we can push to branch of the context API, and that's it. And now what do we want to do? So inside this context API branch, now we will have the example of the context. So let's move on to the React's official documentation ones. So here we have the React, and here we can have the context over there. So we can have here the context over there like that. So here we have the context. So what do we have inside the context? So we have already learned that. So here what we can have, first we can have here a couple of things like creating a context. So we have a function inside the React which is a create context. So we can create a separate context, and after that what we can do, so we can return the context as a wrapper. So here we have the task context. Here you can see the task context, and here as well we have the task dispatch, etc. So we share the context between the children's, and between them we render the UI of our application. So between the context we render the UI of our application, like at task component, the task list, etc. Like that. You can see there could be a lot of context as well. The context is for the provider. Again we have the dispatch. Again we have these things over there. So we can use context anywhere, and we can wrap any children with the context. And here we have the hook of the use context, which can be used to track the state inside the context. So it looks a bit confused or a bit complicated. So what we will do, so we will directly start from scratch about learning about the context. So here inside this source, I'm gonna create a new folder. That could be, we can have the context over there. And inside that, I'm gonna move on. I will create a new file. That could be, we can have the index dot, we can have the JSX like this. And here first we can create a context. Like first we need to grab some information about our application, like if the application is there, Like suppose we can create the same example of the is user is logged in or not with the help of context. So inside the context, what we will do, so we will store a value. We have the login, so we can have the login, logout functionality inside the context. Then we can move on. So we can store the details of the user as well, like user ID like this. And we can do another thing. We can have a property of the is logged in as well. Once again, the is logged in over there like that. So these are the states that we are going to manage with this context. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a context. So we can have the const, we can have the login context like that. So that should be equals to what we can do over there. So we can have here the create context. So here we have the create context, which should be imported directly from the React. And I don't know why it is importing like ES5. So we need to import something from, we can have the React over there. We can import something from the React, and that should be, we can have the create context over there. So these are the states that we want to manage. And after that, what do we want to do? So this is just a context. So the context can be, we can have the login context. So context has a consumer and a provider. So provider is what provides the context. So provider will let you use the values. So suppose these are the states. So provider will let you use these states, and we have a consumer. The components will consume. So those components which consume, which gets the data from this context, are known as the consumers. So there are the providers and there are the consumers for any context. So here the best practice with the React is we can create a separate provider component to manage these states, and we return some of the things with that. So inside the React, you can see first, if we move on, so we can have the const, we can have here the login like this. So we can have the login provider. So here we have the login provider over there, and that should be equals to a function. And after that, we are going to return something. So here we are going to return the children, which we learned inside the phase 1. So inside the phase 1, we learned about the layout as well. So each component gets a children prop over there, the children. So here we are going to return the children over there. So we can return the login context dot provider. So that's a provider. So here we are going to return the provider, and between them we are going to render the children over there like that. So we render the children between them. So children are the main application content. So we all know about this because each React component gets a children over there inside the props, and these children can be used as a layout. So these children can be the UI and they can be the context providers over there. And after that, we need to manage these states: the login, the logout, the user ID, and the logged in. It's logged in property. So here what we can do, so here we can have like use state over there. Sorry, we can have the use state snippet, and this should be imported directly from this as well. We don't need a separate import statement. So here we have the use state. So inside this, first we can have the is logged in property like that. Is logged in, and again we can move on. So we can have the set is logged in property like this. We have the is logged in, set is logged in, and initial value could be, we can have the false. And here we need the state for the user ID as well, because we need the user ID, right? So we can have the state for the user ID. We can again have the use state snippet. That could be, we can have the user ID, and again we can have the set user ID, and initial value could be the empty string over there like that. We have the empty string over there like this. And here you can see we have a couple of functions for the login, for the logout, and for the is logged in. So let's move on and let's use these functions as well. So here what we can do over there, so we can move on. So we can have the functions for the login like this, and that could be a function over there like that. So here we have the function for the login over there. So here you can see now we have the login function, and in there we can have the user ID. We can grab any child component, and what we can do, so we can move on. So we can have the set is logged in. That should be equals to, we can have the true over there like that. We have the set is logged in of the true, and we can have the set user ID. That should be equals to, we can have the true. Sorry, the set user ID would be the user ID that we get from via any component. So that is a login function with that. And we can have the logout function as well. So we can have a similar type of function, which is we have the logout over there. Like this, we have the logout function. And here we don't need the user ID. So instead, what we need over there, we have the set is logged in property. That should be again set to false. We can have the set user ID, which is initial string back. So here you can see now we have some things which we wanted, right? We wanted the login, we wanted the logout, we wanted the user ID, we wanted the is logged in property. So that should be is logged in like that. The is logged in over there like this. We have the is logged in property over there. So you can see now we have the provider. But now inside the provider, we also need to share these values. The is logged in, the user ID, the login function, and the logout. So inside the value, we share that. So let's share that. So either you can define a new object of the value over there like that. Const value equals to, you can move on, you can share the object. Inside the object, you can have the is logged in property. And what you can do, you can have the user ID property over there like that. Then you can move on, you can have the login function over there like that. You have the login function, you have the logout function as well, which any component can use, right? So this is your value that you are going to provide, and you can use that for this value. You can have the value over there like that, and that should be equals to this value over there, right? So now you have this value, right? And now you can export this as a default export as well. You can so now you're sharing this value. So now we have created our context. So again, let's see what we have done. We have the login provider, and here we are rendering the children of the React. Then there you can see now this children is being rendered between this wrapper, Then we have the login, then we have the logout, then we have the const value. The value is being sent to the components. To all the components, the value is being sent as a value property. And here as well, we have the value. And now you can see now we have created that context. So first step is now we want to use this context as well, right? So now we want to use this context, and to use that, the first step is now we want to move on to the main file, and we can wrap that between any component. So suppose inside this example, we can wrap this context to main application. So let's do that. So inside the index.jsx, first we need to export this. So we can have the export default as we can have the login provider like that. So you can see export default of the login provider, and it was very simple. You can see what we have done is we are managing some state, then we are just exporting out these functions. We are just exporting these functions to any children like the user ID and this logged in, the login and the logout. And this login context is using these values as a provider, and the children will be the React component that we will render. So if we move on to the main file over there, the main.jsx over there like that. So here first we will have the provider. We can have the login provider like that. We have the login provider, and after that we can wrap the main application with the login provider. So that is a children which we have used, right? So it's a children over there. So now we have provided the context to the application, right? So here we have the app component, and here we have the provider that we can use. And now what do we want to do? So now we have everything related to that. And now what we can do over there is now we can use the values of the provider. Now we need to use the values of the provider, and for that we can move on to any child component. Suppose if we remove this from now, you can say if we remove this from now, and if we create another component that we can have the using context like that, using context dot we have the JSX over there. So this is a normal React component, and here we have this over there like import React, and we have the using context, and we can use that. We have the context over there. We can use this over there like that. We have using context over there. So if we save, you can see now we have the context, and here we have the using context. But how we can use the context values inside this and how we can work with them, like the login function, logout, and all, and how we can work with them. So let's move on. So inside the using context, first, if we want to grab the value of anything, suppose the is logged in property or the user ID, so inside the React, we have a hook. So let's move on to the react.dev, that how we can use the context. So here we have a hook of the use context. So here we have the use context hook. So use context is a hook that lets you read and subscribe to the context from your component. So how we can use that? So we can have const value that should be equals to use context, and we need to provide that context over there. That's it. That's how we can use that. So there are two ways of using this. So either you can declare the context inside only this file, or either you can use the context here. I'm gonna show you in both ways. So first what we can do, so we can have the const value over there, the value that should be equals to, we can have the use context first, we can have the use context over there, and after that we need to use the context, and this is our context. So we can export this as well. So we can export the login context over there. Then we can use the login context here. Like we have the login context, we can import that. And after that, we can just log the value. So first, let's log the value and let's see what is inside this value. So if we move on to the inspect panel, if we move on to the console, you can see we have something. We have an object. But if we open that object, you can see now we are getting the values as well. You can see right now we are getting the values like the is logged in, we have the logout, we have the user ID, which is initially an empty string. You can see it's working perfectly fine. So now we are getting the values from that context. You can see this was the first way of getting the values. So suppose if we show something like, if we show the user ID here, suppose we have the value over there, we have the value dot, we have the user ID like that, and suppose we change the user ID here to Nikhil like that, we have the Nikhil, and there you can see now we can use the value here. You can see this is amazing that we can get the values like that. You can see inside that we have the is logged in of the false, we have the user ID of Nikhil. So you can see inside any component we can use that. Suppose that could be inside the profile component. So if we render the profile component over there like this, we can render another div. That could be, we can add the profile component over there like that, and we can use the same inside the profile component. So first we can grab this line because we need to use the context. So here we can use that over there like that. We have the use context over there. Then we have the login context that we can use, and instead we can just render, suppose again, though we can have the value dot suppose the is logged in property. So user login, that we can have this over there like user login equals to this, and let's move on to the application. So the is logged in could be the issue, like it should be is logged in. So let me check that void is not working, user login equals to this, and we can have here, suppose we can have the false over there like that. So let me check that void is not working. We have the profile component inside the app. So it is using the context over there. It is using that user login. So first let's just log the value here, that what we are getting. So let's log the value. So we can have the profile as well. We have the profile over there like this. We have the profile, and let's see, you can see from the profile we are getting these values, right? From the profile we are getting these values. But you can see if we move on, so this is being referred as a condition. So it's okay, because you can see this is the JSX and that true false values are referred for the conditions. But if we use here again the value dot, we have the user ID like that, and you can see now we would be seeing the user login equals to Nikhil. You can see in every component we can get these values, right? So that's how we can use the context over there, and that's how it works. And after that, what do we want to do here? So here we have the using context function. So that was the first way of using the use context hook. And the second way is very simple. We can just move this use context again at the top level here. So here, how we can do that? So we can just make this context available at the top level. So I've imported that. And here we can have the export over there. We can have the export const over there. We can have the name of our context. That could be, we can have, suppose we can have the use auth like that. Suppose we have a name like hook. We have the use auth. That could be a normal function over there that will get the context. So we can have the use context over there. That could be equals to, we can have the login context like that. So that could be the login context, and that's it. And now we can grab the values from the use auth. So this would be now the main function in which we can grab these values. So now let's move on to the top level once again. So here, instead of using all these things, the use contact and the login context, we can have the const value. That could be, we can have the use auth over there like that, and we can grab everything with that. So if we refresh, you can see now we are seeing the Nikhil again. So that's very interesting. You can see it's working perfectly fine. So here we don't need to pass anything. We can just add one line over there, and you can see how clean our code is with that. You can see we have here the login context, and here we have the use auth. So now we don't need to export this login context as well. And you can see it is working seamlessly fine, perfectly fine over there. You can see now we are seeing the Nikhil. We can just don't use the value as well. We can just grab the user ID directly. We can have the user ID. We can just directly show the user ID inside this, and you can see it will work perfectly fine. So that's how we can use the use context within the React, and you can say it is working perfectly fine. So that was a basic example, but another thing to mention, that you can use context for a lot of providers. Suppose there could be the main context provider. So you can see there could be as many providers as you want. So there can be the main top level provider as well. Then you have the login provider, which can manage a module of your application. Then you have the theme provider. So the components that you want to use inside the theme, so they can be between the theme provider. You can have the data provider as well. So suppose there are some components which manages the data, so you can have the data handler as well. So I mean that you can have as many providers as you want with the help of use context. So this was just for the dummy purpose, but you can see we have created a very great example that how you can use the provider inside your applications. So again, let's just get back to that. So let's remove everything with that over there, and let's move on. So there you can see inside the use context over there, inside the using context file. So we haven't used the functions like this, like the set is logged in or set user ID. So what we can do, so we can just conditionally render something over there. Like we can have another div, like we can have the user, or what we can do, so we can move on. We can have is logged in property as well. Like this, we have the is logged in property. So we can check if we have the is logged in property. Then what do we want to do? We want to render some different content. Like we can just render the h1 over there like that. We have the h1 over there like this, and we can render hi welcome like that. We have the hi welcome. So we can have the hi, and we can have again the name. So we can have the user ID like that. We have the user ID welcome like that. We have the hi user ID welcome. And if we don't have anything, then we can just have some form. So here, suppose we can just have the button over there like that. We can have the div over there like this. So we can have the div like that, and inside this div we can just move on. We can just have the button over there. We can have the button over there, like we can have the login like that. And on click of this button, on click of this button like that, what we can do, we can have your suppose handle login over there, handle the login. Then what we can do, we can move again to the top level with the handle login. That should be equals to, we can have this component. And here what we can do, we can just have your side, like we can have your something, like we don't need anything. We can just call the login function directly. So we can have the login function as well, and we can have the logout function as well like that. So here we can just call the login function over there, the login that should be any name that we can provide, like Nikhil once again, or we can have the Thadani like that. We have the login of the Thadani, and let's see what happens. So you can see now initially the value is falsy. So let me move back to the index.jsx and let's remove everything. So you can see initially we can see the login over there. So once we hit on the login, you can see hi Thadani, welcome. You can see it updates instantly and it also re-renders the component. And after that, we can move on. So there, if we again get back to using context, so here we can wrap this inside a div as well. We can just again use a div at the top level again. So here we have the hi welcome, and there we can have a button as well. On the on click of that button, we can have the handle logout over there like that. We have the handle logout, and we can have the logout like this. So inside the handle logout, what we are gonna do, so we can have the const handle logout. That could be a normal function, and from there we can just call the logout function, and that's it. So if we move on, you can see hi welcome. If we click on the logout, now we are logged out, and if we click on the login here, you can see hi and welcome. So you can see with this step, we completed the demonstration of the context API in the React. We used and we created the context, we created the providers, we have some of the values like the user ID is logged in, login, and the logout. We have the authentication context, and again, you can see we can mutate the values inside the context, we can update the state and everything with that. You can see that's how we can use the context within the React. And you can see how hard it would be if we just use the props, and the context made it very clear and very helpful for us to manage everything with that. And you can also use some of the effect functions as well, some of the hooks as well within the provider, because it is a normal React component that you can use. So with that, we completed the demonstration of the context, and this concept is now covered within the React. So that's it for the use context and the context API within the React. So let's move on to the another concept of the React, which is the routing. So how we can use the routing with the React. So let's first discuss about the routing. So router helps us navigating to a different page. So this is just the router. So suppose if we open any web page over there, and after that, suppose we open the react.dev, you can say this is the home page of the React official documentation. So if we move on, if we click on the learn, you can see now we have a different web page. Now we have a different route in which now we are navigated to. And again, if we move on to the reference, you can see now this is a different web page. This is a different URL route, and this is also different, and this is also different. So routing helps us to navigate to a different web page inside the web development. And I think you already know about the routing as we are coming directly from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right? So how we can use the router with the React? So there are two ways. The first way is again the straightforward way of using the anchor tag. So with using the anchor tag inside the React, it's not recommended because the application gets reloaded and there's a loss of state as the page reloads. So it's not convenient for single page applications. So with using the anchor tag, suppose if we move on to the example, and suppose if we add the anchor tag over there, like suppose we have the a tag over there, the ref could be, we can have, suppose we can have the home.html over there, the home.html, and here as well we can have the home like that. So suppose if we add the anchor tag, so we also need to add the HTMLs inside our application, which is not recommended because here we are working with the JSX, so we don't need to use the HTML files over there unless it is separately required. So suppose if you want to create a home.html here, we should create that inside the public folder because the public folder is being located as the main page of our application. So we need to host the home.html inside the public server. So here we can have the home dot, we can have the HTML over there, and after that we can have the structure of the HTML5. We can do whatever we want. That could be, we can have the home over there, and here as well we can have the home like that. So if we move on, if we just again move on to 5173 over there, so there you can see now we have the home route. So if we click on the home, You can see now we are into the home.html, so it works fine. But there's another thing that you can see, moving to the home route is completely different. You can say it is different. So now it is being handled to the HTML, not to the React. So as we are creating this single page applications with the React, so it is not convenient and it is not even recommended because we use the single page applications. So what are the single page applications again? So single page application is once we reload this application, so applications get reloaded only one time. So only one time the whole application gets reloaded, and after that it does not reload, because one time the application gets reloaded, it registers all of the states and memory which this web page uses. And until we leave this web page, so the memory gets there. So even if we refresh, the memory gets lost. So we lose everything of our application, including the state. So there would be just dummy static HTMLs over there. That's it. So we lose the state, and you can see this is also a single page application. So the application also gets reloaded. So the anchor tag is not recommended for us. So instead, we have a library inside the React, which is a React router DOM. So we can use a router library which adds this support for the router inside the React. So by default, React does not support the routing. So we use the library which is React router DOM, which is used for client side routing. And it is very fast as compared to the normal anchor tag. So the React Router DOM is extremely fast as compared to the normal anchor tag because it instantly updates the page. It instantly updates the UI of a page because we are navigated to a different UI, and without even refresh and without even reload. And another thing to mention, the states are persistent between multiple navigations. So if we are navigated to a different page, the state of our application, so the previous state will never get lost. So the state will not be lost. So we'll have a same state even when navigating to a different page. So that's the routing with the React that's we can do. That's what we can do. So for using the routing again, what we need to do, we need to install a library. So we can move on. So we can search for the React router. We can have the DOM like that. We have the React router DOM, and here you can see the latest version is 6.21.1. So you can see now we have this router over there. So you can see we can have the React router. Overview could be we have the client side routing. So it means we can update a URL on our browser without reloading any different page and without making a request to any different page. So here you can see we can have the router over there like this. We can have the routers over there like that. And that's how we can use the routings over there inside the React. So we will look an example in a moment. And after that, what do we want to do? So first we need to install this library. So we can move on into the React router DOM, and you can see the amount of downloads around 51 lakhs, around 5 million downloads per week. You can see that's the amount of routing with the React router DOM. So here we need to just copy this to install that, and we can move on to our application. So here we can either create a new terminal, and we can do, or we can paste that over there, the npm install the React router DOM. So it will install the React router DOM inside our application. You can see it is downloaded and it is updated. After that, we can close this terminal. And after that, what do we want to do here? So first, let's remove the HTML file over there because it's not needed. We can remove this as well. So everything is working perfectly fine. So how can we add the router? So first, we need to add the context of the router inside the main file, like we did as the login provider. So what does this login provider does? So it provided couple of values and couple of references and couple of states to the main application, and same like that we can add the router to our application to use the routing. That's it. So it is also a context at the top level, that we can use inside children components. So before that, what we can do, we can have here the router. First, we need to import something from the router. So we can import something from, we can have the React router DOM, we can have the React router DOM, and we need to import the browser router. So browser router is a context inside the React. So it is a router. So you can see browser router just wraps our application with the routing functionality. So it wraps our application and it provides the routing functionality to our application. So let's move on. So here between them, we can add the browser router like that. We can have the browser router and we can just wrap our application with that, the browser router. And now what do we want to do? So now our application can use the features like routing. So now we should move on into the app. So what we do inside the HTML? So first we register the routes. And how we register the routes inside the HTML? We provide the anchor tags over there, the anchor tag for this route, anchor tag for this route, anchor tag for this route. So we do those type of things. We need to do same with this as well. But inside the HTML, we create a different file. But here inside the React, we link that route to a different component. So there's a major difference between the HTML and the React routing. So inside the HTML, we declare the file and then we link to the anchor tag. And inside the React, we declare the route over there, we register that route, and then we link it to a component that is rendered onto that page. That's it. And how we can do that? So we need to register these routes. So let's register all of that. For registering, we need to import something from the React router DOM. We can import something from, so we have the React router DOM. So you can press RRD because you can see it is starting from RRD. And once you press RRD over there, you can see this gets searched over there like that. And after that, what we can do, we can have a property of, we can have the routes. So routes is a container in which we add the routes. So it's a container and you can see a container for a nested tree of route. So after that, we need to import another thing which is a route. So we need to use the route feature over there. The route registers a route and this routes is a container for these routes. So what we can do over there? So after this routing over there, let's move on. So let's have here the routes over there as a container. So here we have the routes container. And after that, we need to subscribe for all of these routes with using the route over there like that. We have the route component which uses that route. So inside the route component, you can see what are the props that we have. So we have the component that we want to render. And there's another thing which is, you can see, which is we have the path. So what is the path for this routing? So suppose, so you can see the application runs on slash nothing. So this runs on the home page, which is slash nothing over there like that. If we move on, so you can see it works on this 5173. So what if we want to move on to slash home route or slash, suppose we have slash products over there like that. We have slash products. So here we have registered a route which have the path of slash products. So this domain name slash products over there. And after that, we need to render here the element over there like that. We have the element. So here we can render this element over there like this. So element is the routing element that we need to provide. So suppose we can create a new folder here. That could be, we can have the pages over there like that. We have the pages. And after that, suppose we have the pages of, suppose we have the products over there. Products dot, we have the JSX. And we can have the RFCE for the quick boilerplate code. And we can have the page for, we can have the orders like that. Orders dot, we have the JSX. TSX is used for the TypeScript. So we can again have the RFCE again. And there is another page for, we can have the account like that. Dot, we have again JSX like that. And after that, we can again have the RFCE for that. And you can see we need to provide the element. So for the products, we can provide the element of, we can have the products like that. So here we have the products. So inside the element, we want to execute the products over there. You can see that's how we declare a route. So first we have the routing, which will be rendered on all of these screens. So you can see this is the topmost layer. So this gets rendered on every screen, right? Because it is at the top. And after that only we have the routes over there. So the routes can be changed, so we can move to a different route. So suppose if I add something over there, uh, let's skip that. So there you can see now we have the h1 tag. It is at the top layer. So line number 7 is at the top, but after that we are adding the routing over there. Only after that we have the routing. So after we render this routing h1 tag, then this application registers all of these routes. So these products, or we can add as many routes as we want. So all of these components first have the h1 tag, right? Because it is there at the top level. So let's move on. So again, what do we want to do? So you can see if we refresh over there, if we refresh, you can see now we don't see anything over there, because now we don't see anything. But if we move on to slash products like that, we have slash products. So there we go. Now we have the products over there and everything seems to be working perfectly fine. Now we have the products over there, so they are working. So now this route is working over there. And if we change anything inside the products, suppose we have the products page over there like that. And if we again move on to the products page, so if we again move on to slash, we can have your products like that. So you can see we have the products page, and if we change anything once again, you can see it will be added instantly. So you can see that's how we clear the routes. So suppose you can see now we have two more routes. Let's register them as well. So first again we can have the route. For registering that, again we can use the path variable. So the path could be, we can have slash orders like that. We have the orders, and then you can see after that what we can do. We can render the element over there like this. The element could be, we can have the orders over there. So we can have the orders like that, and same we can do to the account as well. So we can have the account like that. So account, we have the element of, again we can have the account over there like that. So you can see we have the products, and again we can have the account as well like that. So we have the account, and then we can move on. We can have for the orders as well. So here we have the orders, and here you can see now we can see the orders over there, and it's working perfectly fine. And you can see that's how we can navigate to the different pages of our application. We register the routes and then we navigate to that page. So it is super simple like that. You can see it is super simple with that. So one thing did you mention here? So what if we have the home page? Like what if we want to render different page on this home route? So we can do that as well. We can declare a new file. That could be, we can have the home dot, we have the GSX over there. We can have the RFCE, and we can have the home. And here as well, we can register a new route. We can do that at the top level as well. We can have slash, nothing after that. Then we can have the home over there to be rendered. You can see now initially we have the routing, and initially we have the home page. And then we can move on. Then we can move on. Then we can have the orders. Then we can have the products. So whatever route which are registered here, we can navigate to that. So that's how we can implement the routing inside our application. So you can see with the help of the React Router DOM, it was quite easy and simple. So that's it. No, because you can see we use the concept of this single page application, right? That we cannot reload the web page because the state gets lost. But here you can see for navigating to a different page, we are using the browser URL. And it's not recommended for the user experience because it is very bad for them. So user does not know that which page we need to redirect. So we need to create a mechanism in which we can have the navigation bar like thing. We can click on that and that page appears. We can click on that and that page appears. So how we can do that? So again, with the React Router DOM, we can use a thing. We can do that. So suppose I have a component. So I'll create a new folder. That could be, we can have the header of our application. So I'll now create a customized header of the application, and we will render those links there: the home, products, orders, and the accounts. So first design the header. So we can have the header like this. Dot, we have the, sorry, again, that should be the JSX. And here, what do we want to do? So again, we can have the RFCE. And here we have the div, or we can move on. We can have the nav tag like that. We can have the nav tag, and again we can have the style. The display of this should be, we can have the flex, we can have your, and we can have the margin from left. That could be, we can have the auto over there, or we can have the margin, like we can have the auto like that to render this into the center. Then we can have the gap as well. The gap should be somewhere around, we can give the 5 like that. And we can have the justify content of again inside the center, and we can have the align items, that should be again inside the center of the screen. And after that, we want to render the links. So how we can render the links with using the React Router DOM. So React Router DOM allows us to use a link component which is used for navigation. So if we use the link from the React Router DOM, so the state gets persisted, so state will not be lost, and there would be no refresh onto the browsers. So let's import that. So we need to import something from, we can have the React Router DOM like that, and we can use a link tag from them, the link tag like that. And after that, we can just have the link. So we can have the link over there like this. So here we can just have here the link over there like that. So we can have the link tag, and inside the link, what do we want to do? So the most important prop inside the link, which is a 2. So here we can have the 2 over there like this. So 2, we can have the URL for that. So suppose we want to move on to the URL of the orders. So then we can define the orders. So we can have the orders like that, where the 2 equals to the orders. Then we can have the title to this. We can have the title, and that could be, we can have the orders like that. And that's it. So here we have the link, 2 equals to orders. The title equals to, we can have the orders. So let's render this header. So this header needs to be available at the top level. So for the whole application, the header needs to be available, right? For the whole application, it needs to be available. So we can render the header over there at the top. So we can remove that. We can have the header tag over there, and then we can just render the header component from there like that. So here we have the header component, and from there you can see, now we can see the orders. So sorry, we need to move on to the main page, which is the home, and you can see now we need to render here the header tag over there. So here we have the header tag, and inside that, what we are doing is we are returning the link tag over there, the title of the orders. Maybe the version has been changed, we have the orders like that. So what if, so there you can see now some version could be the issue. So here we have the link 2 equals to the orders, and we can remove the title as well. Now I think we can remove the title, and still there you can see now we have the orders. So it is working perfectly fine. So the orders are being added here as a children, so it's working fine. So there you can see now we have the orders, and once we hit on the orders, so there we have the orders over there. You can see if we click on the orders, you can see now we are into the orders page without refreshing the application. And again, we can add another link over there. It is very simple. We can have for the, suppose we can have for the home as well. We have the home, and that should be, we can have the home as well. That should be for the home. Home should be there at the top as per this. Then we have the orders. Then it should be, we can have the products over there. We have the products, and that should be, we can have the products over there like that. We have the products, and again, if we want to move on, we can have for the accounts as well. We have the accounts, that should be, we can have your the accounts over there like that. We have the account like that. So you can see that's how it's gonna work. We have the home, orders, products, and the accounts. So if we move on to the web page over there, you can see if we click on the home, now we are into the home page over there. Now we are into the home page, but I think inside the home page, we are not specifying the URL of the home. So if we click on the home again, you can see now we are into the home page. If we click on the orders, you can see now we are into the orders page. Products, now we are into the products page. Account, now we are into the account page as well. I think the S is extra over there. Now we have the account. If we refresh, if we move on to the account, you can see now we are into the account page as well. So you can see everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So you can see that's how we can navigate to the different links inside our application, and it is super simple. You can see without even refreshing the page, you can see it is instantly fast. It is very fast as compared to the normal anchor tag routing. We hit on the products, it's working fine, account working fine. So everything is working perfectly fine. So now we saw that how we can use the static routes like that. We have the orders, the products, the accounts like that. So it seems to be working perfectly fine. But what if we have a nested structure? Then simple, we can just add some things like, suppose we have here the nested route over there. We have the nested like that. Dot, we have the JSX over there. So for the nested route, again, we can have just a component. We have the nested route. And again, inside the app.jsx, we can register that deeply over there. We have the path slash account or slash, we can have the app slash, we have the nested over there like that, the app slash nested. And we can have the nested over there like that. We have the nested route, which means we have a route. And again, we have a deeply nested route inside that. So if we move on, so we can add that here as well. We can add a link over there like this. We can have the link. We can have the nested over there like that. We have the nested. So let's see what happens if we move on to the nested. You can see if we click on the nested, now we enter the slash app slash, we have the nested, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine over there. You can see it working perfectly fine. And now another thing that I want to show you and how we can create a dynamic route. So for creating the dynamic route, again, we can move on. So here we have, suppose we can move on to the app.jsx. So for the dynamic route, we just declare another route like this. We can have the route like that over there, like path. That should be suppose any user like that, slash any user, slash anything like that. So how it works, how the dynamic route works. So we have a URL, like we can have slash user. Then we can have any value which could be dynamic. So after the user, there could be any value, like there could be the ID of the user, there could be the name of the user. So that is completely dynamic. So suppose that is the ID over there like that. So it means now we are navigating to the profile pages of a user. So we can have slash user slash one. So we can display the records of user ID 1, slash user slash 2. We can display the records of the user ID 2 and so on with that. So the ID could be the dynamic, and how it can work. Then we can create another route in which it get accepted. So we can have dynamic like that, dynamic route dot, we have the JSX over there. Then we can register this as well like this. We have the dynamic route, and there what we can do. So we can move on to the app.jsx. Then we can have the dynamic route over there like that. We have the dynamic route, and again we can move on to the header. We can register that as well. We have the link to equals to, we can have slash user slash anything after that. We have slash any. So either what we can do. So for now we can have slash user slash fun. That could be, we can have the dynamic like that. So that could be the dynamic. So if we just hit on refresh, you can see if we hit on the dynamic, now we are into the dynamic route. So slash user slash anything after that, it means now we enter the dynamic. It could be 100 as well. It could be, we can have the 1000 as well, or anything with that. It could be any ABC or XYZ like that. So the dynamic route gets handled for that route. So that is a dynamic, because here we have defined here the underscore, sorry, we have defined the colon ID over there. We have the colon ID, the element equals to the dynamic route over there. So it is working perfectly fine like that. So that's how we can use the routing with the React. You can see now we covered the static routes, now we covered the nested routes, the dynamic routes, how we can use the router with the React, and you can see more importantly how we can use the link tag in which we can navigate to the different pages of the router inside the React. And another thing to mention, so if we are using the link for the navigation, you can use the nav link as well. So nav link is just similar to the link tag. So you can have the nav link over there like that, here as well, here as well, here as well, and here as well. So there we can have the nav link over there like that. So it would be similar with that. So it would be same. We can move on to the home as well. We can move on to the orders, the products over there, the account, the nested, and any dynamic route over there. And another thing to mention, again, another thing to mention, that what if we want to get the value of any dynamic parameter there inside the URL? So how we can get this value? So it is super simple. So we can again move on to the main.jsx. Sorry, we can again move on to the dynamic route, and inside the React router DOM, we have something from which we can get the value. We can have the React router DOM. We can get the value from, I think we have we have a use params inside the React router DOM in which we can get the URL params as well. So inside this div, what we can do, so we can have the JSON dot stringify. We can have the use params like that. We can have the use params dot suppose we have the ID over there. So we can have the ID. You can see now we have this ID over there and it is working perfectly fine. So you can see this ID is the ID which we have registered inside the app component, right? We have this ID registered. It means we can just grab the ID value only if it is registered here. But what if it is as the user ID like that? What if we have the user ID? Then we cannot get the ID. Then it won't even link to that because now we have the ID over there. And if we move on to the dynamic once again, you can see now we won't be seeing anything over there because now this is the user ID. And here what we are doing, so we are destructuring just the ID. So that should be the user ID like that if we register the user ID, and that's how it's gonna work. And we can remove the stringify as well. So we can remove that as well. And after that, the React hooks are not be used inside the JSX. So you can see what we can do. So we can have the const, we can have here something like, we can have the ID like that, and that should be equals to, we can have the use params dot, we can have the ID like that. So we can use the use params dot ID, and we can do here as well. So we have the div ID equals to this ID like that. And if we move on, if we refresh, sorry, it should be the user ID again, user ID. So you can see it is working perfectly fine like that. So that's how we can get any dynamic value. So suppose if the ID is different, if the ID is suppose any number like that, so we would be getting that number here as well. So that's how we can do anything with the React with using the dynamic IDs. So with this, now we have covered the concept of the routing as well inside the React. So inside the phase 2, now we have covered the concept of the context API, and now we have covered the concept of the routing as well in detail. So now we should discuss the application wide state as the next step. So we will be discussing the application wide state, handling that with the context API, and handling that state with the help of Redux. That's how we can use the Redux with that. So we'll use the Redux inside the next video to display that how we can use the application wide state with the React. So congratulations on completing another great concept inside the React, which is a routing, which is very important part and very integral part of the web development, that how we navigate to the different pages. So that's it with that. So the routing, you can say now we have completed that, and a big congratulations on that. So that's it for the routing. So hey everyone, and welcome back. So how's the course is going? So I hope it is extremely good and relevant to you. And now we are back with another example project for our course, which is a GitHub user search application with using the context and router of the React. So it's a GitHub user search application, an application where user can search the profile of any GitHub user. So we search the profile of any GitHub user and then we display that inside our application. So it's a complete intermediate to advanced level application. Then we have multiple pages and context within this application. So we already learned about the router inside the last lecture, and we already have enough knowledge on the context because we created an example of the context as well while learning that. So here as well, we have multiple pages and the context. So we have the home page and we have the users page where we display the information of the user. Then we have the context here. We have two contexts for now. The first context that we have is we have the theming concept. So we have the theme context over there in which we have the light mode and the dark mode within this application. And the another context that we have is for searching the GitHub user and for storing the GitHub user inside that context. So we don't have to manually update all of the components for using the user's approach for finding the users and storing that inside the state. So we are having the application wide state for the user as well. And when the user searches we display the notification bar at the top when the user searches, and when the search get complete, when the application request, when the API request gets completes, then we display the notification as success. And the page moves to the user page when we fetch the data, and then the information of the user is being stored inside the GitHub context. Inside the user's context, where we store all of the information of all of the GitHub users that we search throughout this application. So it's a intermediate level application where we will learn a lot of the things along with the React. So we'll be using a couple of libraries, like we'll be using the React Hot Toast for the notifications, and we'll be using the library of the React icons for using the icons inside our application. And apart from that, we'll be having a lot of performance considerations within this application. So you know that the if we see the concepts of the phase 2, so there are a lot of concepts. So concepts regarding the performance optimization and concepts regarding the Redux. So here inside this application, once we complete this whole application, then what we will do, so we will analyze that how we can replace the context with Redux. So what we gonna do? So we already have implemented this application in context. So once we complete that, and then we move on, and then we see the problems with the context, then we will analyze that problem, and then we will see that what Redux can help us to overcome that challenge. So we'll be implementing the Redux inside this application for solving some of the problems with the context, not all, because Redux is also not perfect and even the context is also not perfect. So we will see that what is the main challenge about the context and what Redux will help us to solve that. So after we complete this, we'll be using the Redux as well, and then we will have a couple of more hooks that we can explore. So within this application, inside this application only, we'll explore a couple of more hooks which can improve the performance of this application. And it is very in-depth concept of the React within this application. So this is very useful for your career if you have the hope of becoming the React developer. So without wasting much time, let's dive into our application and let's move on and let's see that how we can build this application. So we are gonna build with complete scratch. So we are already creating a new React application for this. So we create the new React application, and then we start from complete scratch to the advanced level. So without wasting much time, let's dive into this project, and best of luck for this. Yeah. So here I'm into the application folder. So for now, we were using the components -tsx application. So I know the name was not correct, but we already have a couple of things inside this application. So we covered the basic concepts like components, JSX, then we moved on to the advanced things as well. And then we use the hooks as well, the context, the routers and all within this. But for this application, what we gonna do is first, let's open the terminal over there. So let's open the terminal like that. Let's create a new terminal. So I'm bored of that. So let's create a new terminal over there and let's move on. I think inside the root directory, we can create another React application. So how did we create the new React application? You already know that. And again, we can use the npm create wheat we have the latest. So this was the command for creating a new React application. We can name our application as well. We can name our application like we can have the GitHub user search like that, GitHub user search. Then we need to select a framework that we want to build on. We have the React. Then we'll be using the JavaScript over there. And after that, what we're gonna do? We can move on to the GitHub user search. And after that, again, what we're gonna do here, you can see here we don't have the node modules, so we can install that. We have the npm install, we have the node like this, we have the node underscore, we have the modules like that. Oh, sorry. It should be just the npm install. So here we have the npm install, and all of the dependencies would be getting the installed from the package.json. And after that, what do we want to do? So till then, we can move on to the app.jsx. We can remove everything from there. We can remove everything. We can also remove the use state variable. We don't need that. We can remove everything. And inside the return, we can just have the div with stating that hello. And after that, you can see now we can move on to the main.jsx. Here we have the strict mode enabled, so we won't have any problem with that. And after that, we can run the npm run dev to open this application's development server. We have the npm run dev for that. And once we save, so here we go, here we have the development server ready for our application. So here we have this application over there. We can have it like this. So here we have this application, here we have the hello. And till then we can remove this terminal as well. So here we have the hello. And after that, what we're gonna do? So we are gonna start from scratch. So let's remove the CSS styles as well. Let's remove all of the CSS styles directly from the app.css as well and the index.css as well. And after that, you see here we have the hello. You can see another flaw here is we have some padding. So from where we have this padding from there, we have some margin and we have the padding. So from where we get that? So by default inside the HTML pages, we have some default margin and the padding. So by default, we have some margin between them. Suppose that could be 4 or 8 pixels. So we can also remove that. And how we can do that? So we can move on to the index.css. We can have some HTML, then we can have here the body. So it is there inside the body. So we can have the body of our application. And here we can have the padding, that should be, we have the 0 pixels. And then we have the margin over there. So we have the margin, that could be, we have the 0 pixels. So there we go. Now we don't have any margin over there. And now that's a fresh React application for us to get started. So that's a fresh React application. And now what we're gonna do? So here first let's define the folder structure for our application because it is extremely important for modern development. So how you categorize all of the folders is extremely important for your career as well. So what we're gonna do? So I am also not expert in developing the folder directories. So let's just use some basic. So here inside this application, we'll be having the components as well. So we have the components and we'll be having some of the pages as well. We have the pages and inside the source again, we can move on. We can have, suppose we can have here some layout as well. So we have the layout. And after that, what we gonna do is we'll be having the context as well. So here we have the context and that's it for me. And after that, what we gonna do? So first, let's move on. Before everything, let's install the dependencies that we require for this application. So we can have cd into the GitHub user search application. And then what we gonna do is we can install a couple of libraries for us. The libraries could be, first we need to install, I think we need to install here the router. So we can have the npm install. So why, I don't know what happened. So here we can have the npm install react dash, we have the router dash, we have the DOM. So we need to install that. And after that, what we gonna do here? So first, let's wrap our application with the React Router DOM. So we can move on to the main, and you already know because we did in the previous example, you already know that. And after that, we can have the browser router. Here we have the browser router, and it needs to be imported directly from React Router DOM. So it's a top level container for that. It's a top level context for adding the routing functionalities inside our application. So here we have the browser router, we can import that. And after that, we can wrap the full application within this. So we have the browser router and we have here the application. We have the browser router like that. And now we have the routing over there. And now let's define. So let's move on to the pages. Let's create a new file that could be, we can have the index dot, we have the JSX like that. And here, what do you want to do? We have here the index and here we can have the register, or what we can have. So we can have the pages like that. So here, what we're gonna do? So we can have the pages like that. So all of the pages that we have can be rendered over there. And after that, what we gonna do is we need to import something from the React Router DOM. Something from React Router DOM, and we already know that, right? So we have the routes over there. So routes is a container, a top level container for defining the routes within this application. Then we have each route element. So this is a container and this is a children element for displaying each of the route element over there. And after that, inside this, what we gonna do? So here we can have the routes like that. And after that, And after that, now let's declare each route element. So here we can have the route like that over there. So here we have the route, and inside that route, now what we gonna do? So we can have the path. So that should be, we can have the home page. And after that, now what we can do? So we can also declare the element as well, which will be rendered in the home page. So inside the pages, let's move on. So pages could be, we can have the home as well. So we can have the home like that, home.jsx like that. Then we can have another page that could be, we can have the user dot, we have the JSX like that. And here we can have the REFCE for the boilerplate code. Same for here as well, the REFCE for the boilerplate code. Now we can move on. So here we can register the element over there like that. So here we can have the home for this. So by default path would be home. Then we can have another path that could be, now we can have this user. We can have slash any ID after this user, slash any ID over there. And here we have the element that could be equals to, we can have the user over there that we want to render. And we can add another path over there. So this is a new trick with the React.dom. So we can have the path at the end and we can have the star. It means like those paths where this application pages does not exist. So suppose we move on to slash application slash anything after that which is not registered between these routes. So we can display the not found page with the help of that. So what we can do? So as of now, we can display a new page that could be, we can have the not found like that, not found.jsx. And here we can again have the REFCE. And inside this, we can have the h1 tag. We have the h1, the heading, like we can have the page not found like that. We have the page not, we have the found like that. So we can move on. We can again have the star, and for the star, we can have the not found page like that, the not found. So there we go. Now we registered all of these pages and let's test that as well. So we can have the npm. I think the development server is already running right now. What we're gonna do? So we can move on to the app.jsx. So here we can just register and we can test the routes over there like this. So here we can have the pages like that. So here we have the pages and let's render that. So here you can see now inside the slash we have the home, but if we move on to, we have the user slash anything after that, like anything like that, now we have the user page. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine. And if we enter any invalid route like 7.3 and anything after that, then we have the page not found error. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine over there. You can see if we enter any page, any nested dynamic URL, which is not registered within this application, we can show the page not found. So again, now it works perfectly fine. And the next step is, you can see we have created a folder of the layout. Right, we have the layout. And you know, we learned a concept of the React, which is the props with children. So inside that concept, what we did is we wrapped some of the JSX between the layout. So yeah, that was the concept which we'll be using today in this application. So here we'll be having a layout component for our application. So we have the layout, then we can have the index, or sorry, we can have the layout, then we can have the index dot, we have the JSX like that. And here what we're gonna do, so here we can have the RFCE, then we can have the layout like that, the layout. And inside the layout, so this would be the root layout of our application. And here we can just render the children like that. So the children that we'll be getting between the props, between the component, is that will be rendering over there. And inside the layout, now what we'll be having. So suppose here we have the div. So first we need to define the header of the application, the header. Then we need to define the main content of our application. And the main content is already, we know about that, which is the pages. So first we'll be having the header, then we'll be having the main content of our application. So without wasting much time, let's dive. So inside the components, let's create a folder that could be, we can have the header over there. And inside the header, we can create a file that could be the index, again, index.jsx. So here we can again have the RFCE, and that could be the header of this application. So here we have the header, and what we gonna do is let's move on. So here inside the layout, let's move on to the layout. Where's the layout? So here we go. So within this, now what we can do? So first we can just render the header of our application. So let's remove everything over there and let's write from scratch. So inside the return statement, what we can use? So the React offers you a wrapper as well. So suppose you don't want to add the empty tags for a wrapper and you don't want to add the div as well to the wrapper. So there is another thing with the React is using a fragment. So we can also use a fragment from the React. So we can have the React dot, we can have the fragment. So fragment is again just a top level container for your application and it does not take any space or any margin or something with the HTML. So that's an advantage with using the React. So here we have the fragment and inside that fragment, what we can have, so that is a root layout. So within that, first we can have the header of our application. So here we can have the header like that. We can import the header from there, the header, and we can import the header from there like that. So first we have the header, then we have the pages of our application, then we have the pages. So I think we can move on inside the pages over there here. So here, so there are two options. So either we can display the pages here inside this layout, or we can accept the pages as a children property. So what I'm gonna do here, so I've changed my mind. So what we can do, so here we have the header, and after that we display the main content, and within the main content we can render the children. So here we can have the children over there like that. So here we can have the children and the children will be accepted as the pages over there of our application. And the layout is mainly used for wrapping the header and the footer of your application. So inside this application, we have the header that we have already rendered. And suppose if we have the footer, then we can also render the footer. We can have like application by, we have the Indian coders like that. So suppose we have the footer like that, so we can display that. So the main thing that we have is we can render the children within the main component, within the main tags. And here let's move on. So let's move on to the app.jsx. So here what we can do, so we can have the layout like that. So we have the layout, and between the layout what we can use, so we can have the pages that we want to render. That's it. And there you can see now we have the header, then we have the page not found. So if we move on to the home page, you can see 5173, we have the header, the home, and we have the footer. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So with this step, the folder directories and folder management is complete. And now let's move on to the UI of our application. So let's get back to our application. So here now let's first develop the home page. So let's move on to the pages and inside the home. So now inside the home page, now what we want to do is we want to render this search bar. So we can render the search bar inside the home page. And there's another thing that I want to mention is now if we move on to the layout, now I can remove this footer because it's not looking good for now. So first we have the header, then we have the home over there, and it will look perfectly fine. And first let's develop the home, then we'll develop the header component, and then we'll use the context within this application. So easy for that. So inside the home page, now we want to render the search bar. So here there would be a search bar that we want to render. So let's create a new component. So inside this we can have this search bar like that, and let's create the search bar dot, we have the JSX like that, or we can have the index.jsx, that according to you, that if you want to have the index.jsx or if you want to have the JSX of like the search bar. So I think we can again move on to the index as per our structure of our application. So folders, then the index. So here now what we can do. So first we can have the search bar like that. We have the search bar over there. And after that, now what we can do. So first we can have a div again. We can have the div, and here we can define a class name for this div. We can have the class name, and that could be, we can have a search bar dash, we have the container like that. We have the search bar container, and where we can define the CSS style. So either we can define that inside the index.css because it is already imported at the top level of your application. So suppose if you move on to the main.jsx, you can see it is already imported at top level. So either you can define all of the styles here, or either you can use a new folder for defining that. So here, what I can do for you is, if you want to manage the perfect folder directories, then we should create the new CSS file to manage all that. So let's create that. It's so easy. Then we can have a new folder. That could be, we can have the styles over there like that. We have the styles, and after that, now what we can do? So very simple. So here what we can do is, we can have the search bar .css like that. So let's import that. And here what we can do, so first let's move on, let's have the search bar over here. So here what we can do is, so search bar could be, first we can have the width, we should have the auto width over there, the automatically aligned width. We can have the display, that could be the flex. We can have the justify content, that could be the center. Align items, that could be the center. Then we can have the padding, suppose that could be 15 or 20 pixels. 15 would be okay, it should be the padding over there. Then we can again move on, we can have some background. So we can have some background color, suppose that could be, we can have the RGBs, something like that. We have the RGB, a black type of color, suppose 15, suppose 33 or 50 or 48 like that, 48 like that. So this would be this type of background color over there for the search. And after that, now what we can do, so between the items we should have some gap. 10 pixels of gap should be enough. We can have the border radius, right? We have the border radius, that could be, we have the 10 pixels over there, and that's how it's gonna look. So here we have the search bar container, and between that we'll be having the search bar. So inside the search bar, first we'll be having the input tag over there, the input tag like this. So the input, then we can have the type of the text. We can have the class name as well. We can have the class name, or we can have the input bar again. We can have dot input, or we can have the search input. The search input would be perfectly valid for this. And after that, now what we can do is, we can have this class name for our application. So we have the class name of, we can have the search input like that. And here inside this, so search could take away the suppose the 90% of the width, and the 10% would be given to the icon of search. We can have the background, we can remove the background, we can have the none or transparent like that. We can remove the border from the input, that could be none. Remove the outline over there, that could be, we again have the none. Color of displaying, that could be the white or white smoke, whatever you want. Then we can have the font size of, suppose 22 pixels like that. We have the font size of that, and that's enough I think for that. So here we have the search input for that, and after that we can display an icon as well. So let's see that how it looks for now. So let's move on inside this. So here let's move on to the pages folder first. So where we render the home, then here we can render the search bar like that. So here we can have the search bar over there like that. So here we have the index file. So we have the search bar like that over there. So here we have the search bar. So there we go. Now we have the search bar at the top, and it is working perfectly fine. So that's our top level container for that. And after that, now what do we want to do here is, now we can first move on. I think the styles haven't been imported. So first we can import the search bar.css styles. So let's move on to the index.jsx of the search. Let's import the CSS. We have the import. So we have here, suppose we have here the root directory, then we have the styles, then we have the search bar.css over there. We can copy and we can paste it down here. So here you can see, here we have the search bar, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So here we have the search bar. And after that, now what do we want to do? So I think that's enough for it. Or so here we have the search bar over there. You can see it's not looking good for now, but we can fix it later. And you can see after that we can display an icon as well. So as of now we can define the width as somewhere around 500 pixels for that, the 500 pixels of the width. Then we can have the margin of, suppose we can have the auto as well to make it inside the center. So as of now we have this. So you can see we have input till here. So after that the input would be automatically aligned. So we have input till here, and you can see inside this search input, I think we have the padding of suppose 15 pixels. We can have the 10 pixels for that to make the input available to the full container. So after that, we can display the search bar here as well. We can have the search icon. And for using the icons, let's move on to another library of the React. We can have the icons like that. So we can move on to React icons. And first we can install this package. So this is very beautiful library for importing the icons within the React. You can search for any icon. That could be, we can have the search like that. And there you go. You got all of the search buttons that you can use. So here what I'm gonna use here is we can just display any basic search bar over there like this. So we can have this type of search bar or we can have this type of search bar. It's looking good. But before using this library, you need to install that library as well. So it is just the React icons, that's it. So you can move on, you can close the development server, npm install, we have the React dash, we can have the icons like that. The React dash, we can have the icons like that. So that would be enough for that. And after that, we can import this icon. So here we go, we can use this. So we can just copy this import statement and then we can use that directly inside our application, inside the search bar. So we can just paste that over there. And after that, we can have this icon like ri search to fill like that. So you can see this is being rendered as a component. And after we run the npm run dev as well, so this will be imported and this will be working perfectly fine. So there you can see now we have this icon and it is working perfectly fine. And after that, we can provide the class name to this icon as well. We can have here the search icon like that. So here we have the search icon over there, and let's use this class name as well. So here we have this search icon over there, and inside that it would be very easy. Now what we can do over there is we can have the padding of suppose the 5 pixels over there. Then we can have the border radius over there like this, the border radius 100% of the border radius. Then we can have the color, that should be, we can have the black. So black is already there. We can have the background as well, that could be, we can have suppose the white smoke over there. Cursor should be, we can have the pointer like that. So there you can see now we have the search bar, you can say it is working perfectly fine. We can also move on, we can adjust the size as well inside this. So let's move on, let's adjust the size. So that could be, we can have 30 somewhere around. You can see now we have the size of 30, it's looking so big. We can have here somewhere around 20 as well, so it will look perfectly fine for searching any GitHub user. And after that, you can see now the search bar has been created. So now we can just use some state handling feature as well. We can handle some state over there. So let's move on. So for handling the input data over there, we can use the useref. Right, we can use the useref because we don't want the re-renders whenever we input anything inside this input container. So we can use a useref over there. We can have the use ref like that over there. Use ref, we can import that, and we can have the input ref like that, the input ref, and that could again, the initial value could be, we can have the null. And after that, we can provide that ref to the input ref. So here we can have here the input ref over there like this. Here we have the input ref. And after that, we have the ref, then we can just get the value anytime. So now we completed this search bar, and now let's move on again to the top. So first, let's define anything inside the home page as well. So let's move on inside the home.jsx. So here we have the search bar, and below that we can have another div. We can render something like, we can have the class name. So we can have the class name over there, and that could be, we can have here something like, we have the home dash, we can have the content like that, the home content over there, and we can wrap everything with that as well. We have the home content, we can wrap everything with that. And after that, inside this home content, let's define the CSS styles for that. So again, let's move on inside the styles over there. Let's define the home.css for defining the styles for the home. We can have the home content. We can have the reference of this file here. Import something over there from the styles slash, we can have here the home.css. And after that, now we can display some styles. So inside this, now what we can do? So here, first we can render another div. That could be, we can have any h4 tag like search any GitHub user like that, GitHub user like that. So we can have this search any GitHub user, and inside the h4, what we can do, we can have the style like that. So for one liners, we can use the style as well. We can have the align. Sorry, we have the text align over there. That could be, we can have the center like that. We have the text align of the center. Now we have the styles, and now inside this CSS file of the home, let's use that as well. So let's move on with that. Let's have the home.jsx over there. So inside the home content, again, we can have the width of, we can have the 100% over there like that, the 100% of the overall width. Again, what we can do over there, so we can have some margin from the top as well. The margin we can have from, suppose we can have the top, that could be, we can have somewhere around 15 or 20 pixels for that. Same for the bottom as well. Same for the bottom, the margin of, we can have the bottom like that. So that is 15 to 20 pixels. And we have the h4. So we can also declare the class names for that as well. So suppose we have the class name over there, we can have, suppose the home title like that. For the home title, we can have this over there like that, the home title. And here what we can do, we can have the text line, that could be, we can have the center, and that's it for now. Now we can remove the inline styles as well if you want to have the cleaner code structure. So you can see now search any GitHub user. We can also change the font family as well. The font family could be, we can have, suppose this. So no, it would be not, it would not be imported. So we can have the font family of monospace as well. You can see, I think it's not imported here. So class name of the home title. I think the font family is not working over there. So if we refresh it again, so the development server was off. So let's open that again. So let's move on, npm run, we can have the dev over there. So now it should work perfectly fine. So there you can see search any GitHub user. So it is working perfectly fine. And if you want any other font family, like suppose sans serif could be also be good. We have the search any GitHub user. So that's how we can do it. And after that, now what we can do? So now we have some home content, and now you can see if we move on. So I think now we need to fix this as well. So we can fix it later. So now we can move on to the header. Now we can define the header of our application as well. So here we have the home, which is completed. Now we can move on. We can have the header. So let's move on to the components, header index.jsx. And here what we can do. So let's move on to the header over there. So here we have the header index.jsx. So what we can do first, so we can display, or we can create the header styles. So we have the header dot, we have the CSS over there. And then now what we can do is, first we can move on to the header component. So here we have the header, we can move it inside the side panel. And here let's move on, let's close that as well. So here first import that, we have the import. That should be, we have at the top level again at the more top level, we have the styles, then we have the header.css over there like that. So now we are importing the header. So inside the header, now what we can do? So inside the header, first we can define a section over there. So header section could be there. We can have this section like that. And within that section, now what we can do? We can have the class name over there. So we have the class name, and that could be, we can have the header dash, we have the container like that. We have the header container. And below that section, now what we can do? We can again have the h2 tag over there. Could be the title of our application. So we can have the class name over there. So class name could be, we can have the title of our application and the logo. And then we can here have, we can have the search, we can have the GitHub user like that. We have the search GitHub user or anything like that we want to use. We have the search GitHub user. I think GitHub is enough over there. We have the search GitHub. And after that, we can display a button as well. We can have the button, and inside the button, we can again have the class name over there. So that could be, I think we can have the class name of, we can have this switch like that. because this button will be used to switch the theme of our application. So here we can have, suppose like we can have the switch like that, and we can suppose after this switch we can have an image of somewhere around moon and half sun like that. So we can have this image over there, like we can have the switch. So let's move on to the application. So there you can see now we have the search GitHub, and then we have the button of switch like that. And now we want to style that again. Now we can move on to the header container over there. We can move on, we can paste the styles over there like that. Then inside this, now what we can do? So inside the header container, I think first we can have a something like we can have the display again. That could be we can have the flex to make items inside the row. Justify the content should be center, or we can have the space between over there. The space between. Then we can have a align items inside the center. So there we go. Now this is inside the center. You can see it is there inside this. And now what we can do? So here I think for defining the padding, so it should not take the extra space from web. You can see now it is working perfectly fine. So it's okay over there, I think. Yeah, it's okay. And after that, now what we can do over there is here we have the search GitHub. So first let's move on. Let's have the styles for the title over there. So we have the title over there like that, and we have the font size somewhere around, we can have 30 pixels over there like that. 30 pixels is not enough, so we can have 40 pixels. 40 pixels is enough, I think. Then we can have the switch button. We can have the styles for the switch button as well. So we have the switch theme over there. We have the switch theme. Then we have the switch theme, and here now what we can do. So inside the switch theme, I think we can have the background. So we'll be having a unique color for the background, which is this violet red like that. And we can have the border. That could be we can have the none. We can remove the border. We can have the border radius as well. 10 pixels of that. We can have the outline. That should be none. We need to remove the outline over there. Then we can have the padding. So 5 pixels from top and bottom and 15 pixels from left and right could be there. We have the cursor, that should be pointer over there like that. So here we have the switch button. You can say it's looking great. That could be 10 pixels as well if you want. You can see now it's looking great over there. Now we have the switch button. We have the font size as well. Suppose that could be 20 pixels like that. So here we have the switch button for switching between the themes over there inside our application. So that's how we want that. And we can have the fonts, the weight of the font as well. So font weight over there, that could be 500, could be enough for that. No, the 600 could be enough for that. If you can see now we have the switch, and then we can adjust the color as well if you want. The color could be, we can have the white that we want to use. The not wheat, it should be the white. Suppose the white smoke. So here we have the switch, or if you want a different color you can use that. But I think the font family of 500 and using the same color was looking more relevant over there. So now we have this, or we can have a different font family. So for the title we can have different font family. We have the font family, that could be we can have the cursive. You can see now we have the search GitHub. It is looking fine. We can also use the same color with that. So we have the pale violet red. We can have the color, the pale violet red, and we can have the font weight as well. We can have the border for that. We have the border. So there we go. Now we have the search GitHub. Then we have this button as well. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine over there. And after this, now what we can do here, so we can just fix the alignment of the home page as well first. So here we have the home page, we have the home title over there. So let's move on to the home.css. So here we have the home title. We can have the font size. So that could be, again, we can the 30 pixels for that. So we have the search any GitHub user from our application. So we have this, and I think now we need to fix this. It's not looking good for now. So as of now, we can have the home content. That should be, we can have, suppose we have the 70% for this. So I think the 70% we have this, and we can have the margin. That could be, we can have the auto, and we can place these margins below that. So here we can see that now we have the search any GitHub user over there. But you can see once we move on to the smaller devices, now we would be having this type of state. So I think that's enough for that. So if we have the 100% search any GitHub user, so it's looking great, I think, for that. So now we have this. And after that, now what we can do here is first let's move on to I think it's working great. It's working great over there. Let's increase some padding for the search bar as well. So let's move on to the search bar. Let's have some padding of 10 pixels is there. Suppose 20 pixels because my monitor is a little big. So that's why we are not seeing the enough padding over there. And we can also fix this justify content to the space around, and you can see it's looking great over there. So it's working perfectly fine. And now you can see now we have designed this page. You can see now we have the logo of our application, we have the switch button, we have the search and a GitHub user, we have the state handling as well. So it is working perfectly fine. And now you can see now we have this switch button. Now we should work on the main context of the theme. So let's get our hands dirty on the context of the React. So inside the context, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna declare a new context. That could be we can have the theme provider.with.jsx. So for providing the theme, we'll be using the theme provider for that. Let's remove that. So inside the theme provider, it would be very simple for defining the context. So that's why first I'm designing the theme, then we'll be moving on to the main provider of storing the data and storing the user's information for that. So inside the theme, now what we can do over there. So first we can declare the context. We have the const theme context, that could be equals to, we have the create over there, create context of the React. We need to import the create context. So this should be the ES6 imports. I don't know what happened to the wheat. We have the from, we can have the from over there. That could be, we can have the React. We need to import the create context. Then again, we want to define a provider which can wrap the children's within this context, which can provide the value of this context to the children's. So we can have the const theme provider like that. So that should be a normal React component, and we can export that as well. The export default, we have the theme provider like that, and here between them we'll be having the children as well. So between them we have the children property over there that will be rendering over there. We'll be having the children's between them. And now here what we can do. So first, now we can handle some state. We can handle some state for the light mode and the dark mode. We can have the use state over there first. We can have the use state over there. So the use state, that could be, we can have the mode. We have the mode, then we have the set mode, and initially it should be the light mode that we have. So initially we have the light mode, and after that what we can do is we can have a function. We have the toggle theme, so that should be equals to a normal function. So here what we will do is we'll be having the set mode over there. Here we have the set mode like that. We have the set mode, and that should be equals to some mode that we want to use. So here what we can do here, we have the set mode. That could be, we can have the previous. So for the previous value, so if inside the previous state, if the previous equals to, we have the light mode. So if the previous state is the light mode, then we want to have it to the dark, or else we would be having the same light mode for that. So else we'll be having the same light mode for that we want to use like this. So this is very simple, right? We have the previous. So according to the previous state, if the previous was light, then we want to toggle to the dark. Else if it was dark or something else, then it should be the light again. So that's what we wanted with that function. So that's it. And after that, we need to define an effect as well. So here we'll be having the use effect. From this effect, now what we will do. So if we move on to the application, if we move on to inspect panel, you can see now we would want to change the styles of the body, right? Now we would want to change the styles of the body. So we need to implement that. So inside the body, we want to change the color, the background color. So now after that, now we should use here the use effect. So here we would be using the use effect because once we change the theme, we would be changing the body as well of the HTML. So there we have the body. So we would need to change the style of the body because everything is rendered to the body. So if you want the dark mode, then everything should be dark. If you want the light mode, then everything should be light. So we would need to change the body. So we can have the use effect. But there's another hook inside the React, which is a use layout. So what is the difference between them with the use effect and the use layout? So they perform similar purposes, like for the side effects of your application. But the main difference between that as well. So the main difference between that is the use layout effect works before the browser has painted the screen. Right, before the browser has added everything and painted to the screen. So before that, the use layout effect runs, and after everything is being rendered inside this web page, then the use effect is being called. Right, so I'm explaining it once again. So use layout effect works before your application has been rendered, before your application has been visualized. So before your application has been visualized, it runs synchronously. The use layout effect works synchronously, but after everything has been painted onto your screen, then the use effect gets called. So here we have the layout. So it is mainly used for having the interactions with the DOM. So suppose the browser has painted everything, before the browser has painted everything to you, if you want to mutate something inside the DOM, then the use layout effect is very perfect hook for you. And the major difference again, so the difference number 2 is they are different in rendering the synchronized behavior. So use layout effect is synchronous, but use effect is asynchronous. So there's difference between them. So here we would be using the use layout effect over there, and inside that effect, now what we can do over there, so we can again rerun this layout effect once the mode property has been changed. So once the mode property has been changed, so we can change the styles of body. So we can have the document model, we have the document dot, we can have the body, then we can have the class name over there. We have the class name that should be equals to, then we can check if the mode is equals to, again if the mode is equals to the light, then we should use a class name of, suppose we have the light mode like that, we have the light mode, or we should use here the dark mode like that. So we want to change the class names of the document.body. So if we have the mode equals to light, then we would need the light mode, or we would need the dark mode. So that's it for this context. And now we want to share the values to the children's. So let's move on. So here we can have the return over there. So inside the return statement, now what we can do? So here we have the return. So inside the return, we can have the theme context, or we have the provider over there. And inside the provider, between them, we would need to render the children's again. And the provider will send some of the values as well to the children. So we can have the value that could be, we can have the mode property, we can send the mode. Then we can also send here this function as well, the toggle theme, to the children's to be used. So if you want to add the initial value as well of these properties, you can also do that. You can have the create context. So at the time of creating the context, if you want to have some initial value, you can declare that as well here. So we can have the mode like that. We have the mode that should be, we can have, suppose we have the light like that, the mode is light. And then what we can do, we can have the toggle theme property as well. The toggle theme, that should be equals to a normal arrow function. So that is a normal arrow function. So we can define the type for that. So with the help of this, now you can see, now if we use this context, then we would be having the IntelliSense as well of the VS Code with declaring the initial value for the context. So let's move on. So let's remove this effect. Now we have the theme context. And now let's define another function inside the context. Now let's define another file inside the context. That could be, we can have the index dot, we have the JSX over there. So that should be, suppose we can, so here we can have just the JS as well. We can have the index.js. So here now what we can do. So here we can have the const, we can have the use theme like that. So that should be equals to a normal arrow function with using the context value. So with using the context of the theme context over there. So what the use theme will do? So use theme will allow us to use the theme directly without using the use context. So for using the context, we use the use context, but with the help of theme, what we can do is we can just directly use the context values. We don't need to use the use context once again. So it is not required. If you want to use the use context directly, you can use that, but this is some improvements for our code. Like we can have some cleaner code for our application. So here we have the use context, so that should be the theme context, and that's it. Now we can export this use theme as well, like that. We have export this use theme, so we should use that inside our components. So that's it for that. And now what we can do is now we can move on to the main. And now inside this main file, now what we want to do here. So now we want to wrap the app component with the theme provider that we created. So we can have the theme provider like that. We have the theme provider, and the whole application could be the children of the theme provider, so that they can use the main app structure over there like that. So that's how it's gonna work over there. You can see now it is working perfectly fine over there. If we move on to the application, if we move on to the inspect panel, you can see if we move on to the body, you can see now we have the class of the light mode. It means everything seems to be working perfectly fine. And now let's move on and let's define the styles for the body. We can have the light mode, so we can have the light mode over there. So we can have the light dash, we can have the mode like that. The light mode will be having a different style and the dark mode will be having a different style over there. So for the light mode, what we can do over there is we can have a, suppose we can have the background of, we can have the white smoke like that. We have the background of the white smoke. Then we can move on. We can have the color should be, we can have the black for all of the text and all. We can have the width of 100%. That's it. I think we have the light mode. We can use a similar style for the dark mode as well. So here we can have the dark mode, and that should be, we can have the background of, suppose we have the RGB. The red could be, we can have the 13, then we can have the 11, then we can move on, we can have the 12 like that. We have the RGB 13, 11, 12. So this is a type of black type of color that we want. But here inside the color, it should be, we can have the white smoke like that. So that is what we wanted over there. So you can see now if we head over to this application, so there we have the search GitHub, we have this search and a GitHub user, so it should work perfectly fine. So if we move on to the inspect panel over there, if we move on to the inspect, if we move on to suppose the console or the elements over there, we can have the body. So suppose if we change the dark mode over there like that, if we have the dark mode, so there we go. Now we have the dark mode. You can see it is working perfectly fine over there, right? It is working perfectly fine for our application. You can see that's how we can create the light mode and the dark modes of our application. It's looking great. And now let's move on. Now what do you want to do? Now if we refresh, now we want to handle the mode with the help of switch. We can easily do that. And how? We can move on to the header, and we can first have the const, we can have something, or we can have the theme. That should be, we can have the use theme over there. We have the use theme which we declared. So we declared the theme, and inside that you can see we already have the mode and the toggle theme button. So what we can do, so we can have the on click. So we can have the on click, we can have the handle theme change over there. We have the handle theme change, and that should be added here. That should be a function. And after that, now what we can do, we can just have the theme dot, we have the toggle theme. So that's it. So suppose if we refresh this application, if we click on the switch, you can see now the application has been switched to the dark theme. If we click on the switch again, you can say it is looking great. It is working perfectly fine. So you can see that's how we can implement these things with the help of React inside our application. It's looking great over there. So now you can see now we implemented the UI part of this application. For now, we implemented the UI. And now the next step would be, now you can see first we can grab the value of this. We can grab the value of the input tag. Then what we can do is we can just move on and we can use the GitHub API to search the user. So now comes the complex part of handling the users. So it is complex for you, but I'll make it very simple to implement. So first, let's move on. Let's just check the GitHub API. What we can do is now we can move on. We can have the api.github.com/users slash any user's name. Like suppose if I give my name like Nikhil Thadani. So how it will work? So you can see once I will hit the API with the api.github.com/user/Nikhil Thadani. So there you can see now we have this image. You can see now we have the login, the avatar ID, the URL, HTML URL, followers, guest and all. You can see now what we can do is we can just use the api.github.com/users/any user ID that we want to save. So we can do that. So that is the API URL. This is the base URL for us. So this is the base URL and that is the main name of our application, the Nikhil Thadani over there. So we can copy this and then now what we can do. So for handling all of these API requests for that, we should use another context, a top level context provider, which can handle the state. We have the user provider dot, we have the JSX like that. We have the user provider dot JSX. And here as well, what we gonna do here is now we'll be defining the context. So we have the const, we have the user context. So that should be equals to a create context once again. The create context over there and initial value for that could be, we can have the user property. So initially it could be the null and we can have a function as well. So we can have the function, we have the fetch user like that. We have the fetch user. So that should be the function for us. And that would be an asynchronous arrow function. And inside that we'll be having the user ID inside the parameter and we'll be returning something like that. So here we have the user context. So inside that we'll be having the property of the user. Then we'll be having the property of the fetch user. So fetch user is just suppose a function that we'll be using. So that's a promise that we want to behave. So now we have the user context. It is working perfectly fine. We can export that as well according to it. And now let's move on. Let's have the provider. We have the user provider like that. So that should be equals to a normal React component. So between them now what we gonna do is we can have the children like that once again, the children property. And after that, what we can do, we can have the use state again. We have the use state over there from the React. So here we'll be using the use state. It should be the user. Then we can have the set user property and initial value could again be, we can have the null over there. And then what we can do over there is we can have a function over there for updating the user, the fetch user. And before that, we can have the base URL as well, which we discussed. So that could be the base URL. So we can have the const, we can have the base underscore URL. That could be this URL. So I'm using the full caps naming convention because all of the constants variables should be having a caps behavior, should be having everything inside the caps. So now we have this URL. And after that, now what we can do is we can move on. We can declare this function. So we can have the const, we can have the fetch user here. We have the fetch user. So that could be a normal function over there. And now the fetch user should be having the asynchronous function, should be the async. Here we'll be getting the user ID as well inside that. And here we want to perform the steps that we want to use to fetch the user. So that's it. And now in the fetch user, now we'll be fetching the details of this user ID from the GitHub. So what we can do over there? So again, we can use the try catch block over there. So we can use the try catch block for the error handling as well. So if we have any error, we can handle that inside the catch block. So here inside the try, what we can do? So we can have the const response that could be equals to the await. Then we would be using the fetch method from the JavaScript, the fetch function, which is by default globally available with the JavaScript, within the JavaScript. So with the fetch, now what we can do? So here we have the response variable and here we have the fetch. So inside the fetch, now we want to create the URL that we want to fetch. So the URL could be, we can create that according to the backticks. So it would be a dynamic URL. So first we'll be having the base URL for the API. Then we'll be having slash, then we'll be having the user ID like that. Then we'll be having the user ID. And before that, what we can do is we can validate the user ID as well. If the user ID dot we have the trim, we can trim that as well. If the trim uh, is equals to the empty string, then we don't want to perform anything. Then we can just have the return over there like that. Then we can have the return. And after that, now what we can do over there, so here we have the const response equals to await fetch the base URL and the user ID. So now we have the catch error. So after this response, now we'll be getting the data as well. So we'll be getting the data inside the response. So that should be, we can have the await. It should be the response.json. So response is the actual fetch response. So now we want to convert the response inside the JSON. Now we want to format that because it is not formatted by default. So we want to format to the JSON, and then only we can use that format. And after that, now we have the data. Then the final thing could be we can have the set user like that. We have the set user, that could be we can have the data. That's it. And after we get any error inside the catch, so first we will log that error over there. Then finally we can have the set user. By default should be again, that could be equals to, we can have the null. So that's how we can use the fetch user. And after that, again, now what we want to do is we can have the const, suppose, I think we can skip that. So there was something right now. After that, now what we can do, so we can have the return the consumer, return, we can have the provider, we have the user context over there, or we have the provider like that, we have the user context or provider, and we need to define the value. Value could be here, you can see the user should be equals to the user itself, and the fetch user should also be the fetch user itself, and that's it. And now we want to render the children over there like that. We have the children like that, and that should be the main component over there. And the final thing could be, now what we can do is we can move on, we can export this component. We have the export default of the user provider like that. We have the user provider, and that's it for now, guys. So that's it. So there we have the user ID, here we are defining the context, here we have the provider, here we have the base URL, and here we go, we have the base URL slash user ID, and that's it. And now what we can do over there is, now we can again move on to the index.js. We can create the usable function for that. We can have the use user provider like that. We have the use user like that. Use user is not looking good as per the pronunciation. We can remove that. We can have the use GitHub user like that. We have the use GitHub user, and that should be, we can have the user context like that. So that's how we want to perform that. Then we have the use GitHub user for the export. And now the final thing could be, now we can move on to the main.jsx, and here we can wrap here the users provider, and make sure to wrap it after the theme provider. So we should wrap it after the theme provider. So we can have the user provider like that. We have the user provider, and that could be between the app component over there like that. So that could be the app component. So first we have the router, then we have the theme, then we have the users provider, then we have the main application structure over there, and that's how it's gonna work. And now we can move on to the search bar over there. So here we have the search bar index.jsx. So there you can see, now from this function, now we want to call that. So first let's move on, let's grab the value. Or here we have this button. So here we can have the on click over there like that. We have the on click over there like that. So that should be equals to, we have the handle user search like that. We have the handle user search. And after that, now what do we want to do? So we can have the const something equals to, we can have the handle user search. And here now what we want to do, we can log the value of input ref over there, the input ref over there dot current dot, we can have the value like that. So input ref, the ref dot current, current means all of the properties of the input, then dot value over there. Dot value should be the value of that input. So the same value which we provided over there, which we can provide over there like that, the value could be the same value that we can get. And let's see what happens if we move on to this application. If we refresh, so no any errors. If we move on to the console window over there, we can move on to the console. If we enter anything like nickel or anything like that, you can see now we have the value and everything seems to be working perfectly fine. And now what we can do over there? So first we can grab the context. So we can have const something equals to, we have the use GitHub provider like that, use GitHub user, sorry. And after that, we can just grab the fetch user function, or we can grab the user as well like that. We have the user and we have the fetch user. So inside the handle user search, now we want to fetch that user. So if we run the fetch user like that, if we run the fetch user, and that should be input ref.current.value. So if we have this, so let's see what happens if we move on to the network tab. If we click, or if I search for any user like the Nikhil, I don't know who is this user. So if we just hit on search, you can see now we have the Nikhil over there, and you can see, yeah, there is a user with the name of the Nikhil. It's not me, it's someone else. So there we go. Now we have the Nikhil URL, we have the response, and from the response, you can see now we got the response as well. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So response is in the JSON format. You can see now we have the JSON over there. And after that, you can see it is working perfectly fine. And now what do we want to do? So now once we hit on this button, the handle user search, now we need to call this function. So now for the performance optimization, there is step 1. So now we should be considering the performance first. So step 1 is, now we will be using a hook inside the React, which is a use transition like that. We have the use transition hook within the React. So what is this hook? So it's a hook that lets you update the state without blocking the UI, right? Without blocking the UI. So it is a state, suppose there is an expensive calculation. So suppose there is an expensive calculation of our application, and once we hit on anything inside a UI, if we want to update something, so there could be some delay. So let's see it here. So if I show you an example, if I show you the problem statement here, like updating the current tab without a transition, you can see the post here, you can see the post is very slow. It can have the expensive calculation, so it is very slow. So once we hit on that post, you can see now we cannot hit the contact and all. You can see now we cannot hit the contact over there. You can see once we hit in again, you can see the UI was blocked for a while. Again, if we move on to the about, you can see now we have this. Again, if we reset over there, then you can see once we hit on the post, the UI is very slow. And it is because you can see there are 100 number of records over there, around 300 or 500 records over there. So that's why it took a while. So we were updating the post page over there. We were using the post over there like that, but it was blocking the UI. But you can see if we use something like use transition, now what we have is, now you can see once we hit on the post, now it doesn't block the UI, right? Once we hit on the post over there like this, you can see if we again reset over there, if we again reset, once we hit on the post, now it took again a while, but there you can see now there was interactivity within our application. Even if we hit on the post, we could have hit on the contact, right? We can hit on the about post, then we can again hit on the contact like that. So if we remove this console, this bloody thing, so that's why we can use the use transition hook over there. We have the use transition hook. So let's move on. So use transition always returns two values. So we have the is pending, so the pending state, and we have the start transition. So inside the start transition, now what we have? So inside the start transition, if you want to update the UI without blocking any other thing, then we can use the start transition. So inside this application, now what we can do? We can first have the use transition over there like that. We want to use transition, and once we hit on the search, so here we have this functionality. So once we hit on this search button, now we should be moved on to the different page. So we should be moved on the different page. So that's how we want to do that. So here inside that, now what do we want to do? So first we can define the transition. We have the const, we have something equals to, we have the use transition like that, use transition, and inside that we have the is pending like that, again is pending, and we have the start updating like that, the start transition like that. So we have this thing over there. We have the start transition. And after that, now what do you want to do? So here we have the fetch user. So what we'll do over there? So we'll be having the start transition over there. Then we'll be having the fetch user inside that, inside the callback. So inside the callback, we'll be having the fetch user function. And inside the fetch user, so let's have it a function. So inside the fetch user, now what we will have? So we'll have the input ref dot current dot value. The input ref dot current dot value inside the start transition. Then we have the fetch user over there. So once we hit on once we hit on this button, so this function would be called automatically. Then we would be having the fetch user. So let's see how it gonna look. So it would be pretty same because we don't have any production ready or very big application. So it is just for considering the performance inside our application. So if we have multiple UI updates, then the start transition could be very helpful. So I am showing you because it is in-depth React course. So we should know each and everything of the React. So here, suppose if I search for my profile, Nikhil Tadani, if we click on this search, you can see now we have the Nikhil Tadani over there. Everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So there now we have the Nikhil Tadani and everything seems to be working perfectly fine over there. And now you can see now we have the React Router DOM. So once we start the transition, once we move on, now we want to move on to the different page of the user. So if we move on to again the app.jsx, inside the pages, you can see we already created a page of the user slash ID. So if we move on to that page slash user, like slash anything after that, now we have the user page over there. Right, now we have the user page. So now we want to work on this page. So let's move on. So first, let's move on. Let's just work on the design part of the user page. So inside the user, now what we'll be having? So if I again search for this like this and user like that, so we'll be having the avatar URL, we'll be having, suppose we'll be having the followers, we'll be having, suppose we can have the following it, we can have a, suppose we can have the updated URL like that, public repos as well, so we can display all that. So first inside the user, now what we can do? So we can have the const, we can get the details from the auth. That should be equals to we have the use. Suppose we have the use GitHub context as well, use GitHub user. And after that, now what we can do, we can grab the user property over there and then we can just log the user. So we can have the log, that could be we can have the user like that. And if we move on to this application, if we move on to Nikhil, and if we move on to slash, suppose we have the user slash 100. Now initially we would be receiving the null because now the page was reloaded. So what I'm going to show you is now once we hit on this search, now we should be moved on to the users page. And how we can do that? So here now you can see inside the React Router DOM, we have a function. So let's move on to the search page first. So here we have the search bar. So we can import something from the React Router DOM which will help us to dynamically move on to the next page, which is a use navigate hook. So we have a use navigate hook over there, the use navigate like that. We have the use navigate. So it's a type of custom hook that we can use for moving on to a different page. It's a inbuilt inside the React Router DOM. So we can move on. So first, for using the hooks, we all know that there's a rule for using the hooks that we should not call the hooks directly inside that function. So first we should have a reference at the top. So we can have the const, we can have the navigate like that, then navigate, that should be the use navigate over there. We have the use navigate. And after that, once we move on to the transition like that, then first we can navigate to a different page. Here we can navigate, that should be to a different page. So here we can also define the URL as well. We can have the URL, that could be, we can have slash users slash anything after that, which is having inside the input value. We have the input ref dot current dot value over there. So we can move on. We can have slash users slash input ref dot current dot value. So let's see how it's gonna look. So if we refresh it again, we have the Nikhil Thadani like that. So if we hit on the search bar, you can see now we are into the users slash Nikhil Thadani. I think the page is being rendered as the user only. So we have the user. So if we again move on, we have the Nikhil Thadani. So once we hit on this, so you can see now we are into the user slash Nikhil Thadani over there. And there you can see now we have the details as well. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine over there. We have the login details. So we have each and every detail of the user with the help of that. And everything seems to be working perfectly fine. And now if you want to display the details of that user, so we have here the user like that. And then what we can do over there, we can display the details of the user as well here. We have the JSON dot, we have the stringify, then we can have the user like that to display the user's information. So there we have the information of the user inside this search GitHub application. So that's how it's gonna work over there. And after that, now what do we want to do here is you can see, so why it's taking a lot, it's okay because it's very big string. So now we have the details. Now we want to show each and everything inside the front end. So now we can work on the UI part. So here we can remove this div, and here we can have this section tag over there of the HTML. Then what do you want to do? So we can have some classes for that. So here we can have the class name for this, and let's move on. Let's declare a new CSS file for that. So we have the home.css, then we can have a new file that could be user.css. And after that, now it would be very simple for us. So now let's move on. Let's import the CSS first. We can have the import. We can have at the top level. We can have this like that. At moving on to the styles over there like this. So here are the styles. Then we can move on. Then we can have the user.css like that. And after that, inside this section, now what we want to do. So here we can just create a new component of the user profile. So inside the components, let's create a user profile like that. We have the user profile, and here inside that we can have the index dot, we have the JSX like that. And here as well we'll be having some props of that. We have the we'll be having the RFCE for the boilerplate code. So inside this we should be having some props. So the function name could be, we have the user profile like that, the component. And here inside the props, now we would need a couple of items. The items could be, we can have the image URL of the user. So if we move on to this application, so if we again move back, so here now what we want to do over there, search any GitHub user. So if I search for this user over there, and if we move on to the network tab, you can see now we need the avatar URL. So we can get the avatar URL inside the props. Then we need the login name of the user. We have the login name, or we can have the name over there. So we can have the name like that. Then what we want to do? So here we would be needing the followers of that. We have the followers, and then we have the public repos as well. We have the public repos to be having over there for the user. Then finally we'll be having the HTML URL as well. We have here the HTML URL. Where is this? So here we have the HTML URL, which is the GitHub URL for that profile. So these will be the things that we require for the props. And now what we want to do over there is, now again what we can do over there, we can again have this section over there, and inside this section we can have the class name. That could be, we can have the user profile like that, user profile like that. So that is a section. So now let's move on to the user.css first. So here, suppose let's move on to the user.css file over there. So where it is, so here we have the user.css. So let's define the user profile over there. We have the user profile like that. So inside the profile, now what we want to do. So inside this profile, suppose I think, so first I think what should we do here is we should be having the display of it. We'll be having the display. That could be, we can have the flex, the direction. I think we have the direction of, we can have the column. We need the items on bottom of each other. Justify the content to be there inside the center. Align the items inside the center. That's it. So now we should be having some top to bottom things over there. Then we can have the image of the user. We can have the user image like that. We have the user img. So we can have the border radius like that for the image to be 100%. So with the help of that, now what we'll be doing, so we'll be having the round shape image. Then we should be defining the width, that should be 300 pixels for the image of that user. So that's it, I think. And after that, we can have the title of the user as well. User title over there. Then what we want to do, the font weight should be, we can have this 600 over there. Then font family again, that should be, we can have the cursive over there, so it looks great over there. A font size as well, size should be, again we can have a 35 somewhere around pixels like that. And then the final thing, we should be having the followers as well. So we would be having a new section for the followers. So let's first define the layout. So after the user profile, now what we can do over there is, first we can have the image over there. Image source could be, we can have the avatar URL like that. The avatar URL alt could be the name of the user again. That could be the name of that user. That's it. Then what we want to do, then after the image, we should have the h4 tag. We can have the class name for the h4 as well. The class name could be, we can have the user title over there, user title. And we forgot to add the class name for the image. That should be the user image over there, the class name of, we can have the user image. And inside the h4, we would be having the name of that user, the name of that user. And after that, we would be having the followers section. So we can define a div and we can have the class names as well. Followers section like that. And inside that, what we can do, so we can have the display flex over there. So we would be displaying the followers and we will be displaying the repos. The justify content, that should be center of the screen. The gap between the items could be, we can have 10 pixels, that should be enough for that. And after that, we would be displaying the followers over there. So here we have the div. The class name should be the followers section over there like that, the followers section. And after that, we would be having the div for one follower, like that could be the div for, suppose the class name, sorry, that should be for the class name of, we have the followers. Then we would be having the class name for the repos like that, repos like that. So would be, so here we would be having the repos. So followers, so we have the followers over there and we would be having the repos. So we would be having some classes for that, but between them, now what we can do, so first we can have the paragraph, or suppose we can have the article tag over there. The article could be, we can have the followers like that. Or instead of this, now what we can do, first we can move on. So inside the followers, again we can have the display, that could be, we can have the flex over there. The display could be flex. The direction of the flex could be, we can have the column. So first, now what we can do, and sorry, we should be having the justify content as well inside the center over there like that. So inside the followers, first we can render an icon. So we can move on to the React icons over there like that. And we can just display for the heart or for the like as well. We can have the like, we can have this over there like fc like, we can import that. We have the import this, and we should always be importing the code as well, the repositories of the user. So that would be perfect for that. We can just copy, we can just have the paste over there. And after that, inside the followers, now we should be having, first we should be having the fc like over there like that. And below that, we would be having the article tag. That could be, we can have the followers like that. Followers over there, total number of followers over there. Then after that, we would be having this div for the repos. We would be first having the FA code compare like that. Then we would be having again any article tag. That could be, we can have the public repos like that. And again, we can use these properties there inside the repos as well. Or we can have a const follower. Suppose that could be follower, that could be equals to, we can have the, suppose the nested like that. We have the follower nested. So we can keep this class name for this as well and for this as well. So that's how we want to do that. And after that, let's move on to this application. So we won't be seeing anything because now you can see now we haven't displayed anything inside that, and we haven't sent to this component the user profile. So what do we want to do here? So let's close all of that first. It's creating the confusion. Let's open the user page, the user.jsx. So here inside this section, we should have the container. And after that, we should be displaying the user's information. So we can conditionally render that. If we have the user like that, if we have the user, then only we want to render the user profile like that. Here we have the user profile. So we can display the details. So avatar URL could be we can have the user.avatar URL, and we have the followers. Could be we can have the user dot we have the followers over there. Then we can move on the HTML URL, the user.html URL, and what we can do, we can have the name. That could be we have the user.name property, and then what do we want to do after the name? Then we can move on. We're gonna the public wrappers. That should be user like that. That should be user. Or we have the public wrappers, and final thing could be key. So key could be just we can have the user.id if you want to define that. So let's see how it's gonna look. If we refresh, now we don't have anything. If we move on, if we search for somewhere around Nikhil Thadani, so fingers are crossed. So there we go. Now we have the details. You can see now we have the details. So inside my profile, I haven't used this. I haven't used the name. So we can have the name. That should be we can have the login. So then we should be displaying the name as well like that. So you can see now we can display the name like that. So there we have the name, we have the Nikhil Thadani. Then we have the image. You can see now we have the followers section as well. So now we can work on the followers section as well. Like now, let's move on into that. So here we have the followers, the class name of the follower nested. So we can have some more styles for that. The followers nested. So let's move on to suppose the CSS file of the user. The followers nested could be we can have the align into the center again, justify content that should be center, and even the align items equals to center. We can have the gap of somewhere around, we can have the 40 pixels like that of the gap. You can see now we have the details, and here we can have the font size that could be again the 20 pixels for that, or we can have the 24 pixels as well for the font. You can say it's working perfectly fine. Now we have the details of the user, now we have the name, the login name of the user, and everything is working perfectly fine. So here inside the user, we can display first the name, and if we don't have the name, we can have the user dot we have the login like that. So that's how it's gonna work. You can say it is working perfectly fine. So that's how we can create these type of applications with that, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine. I need another thing. So this application is complete, right? This application is complete. If we move on to slash homepage, you can see now we have search and a GitHub user. This application is responsive as well. But you can see if we move on, if we search for an invalid user, suppose this user, it doesn't have any ID. So if we click on the search, now we would not see anything, right? Now we would not see anything. We just see these images. So now we want to check if we don't have any associated user with that ID. Now we need that validation. So the validation could be, now what I'm going to show you is if we just search for the same thing again, anything after that like this ID, and if we move on to the inspect panel, if we move on to the network, so there we go. If we click on this search, now we would be receiving the message. So this is being stored inside the user property, right? This is being stored inside the user property. So this could be stored here. So then what we can have is here we can check if we have something. So let's move on to the provider. So then we can check like if we have the data dot we have the login. So it means now we have something inside the data, then only we would be having the set user of the data. Else if we have the data like we have the message or anything, so we won't be displaying anything. So again, that could be we can have the set user, that could be we can have the null like that. So that's how it's gonna work. So if we again move on, if we again provide any invalid ID, you can see now we don't display anything. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new component for the not found user. So inside the source, inside the components, let's create a new component for we can have the not found like that, and that could be equals to we can have your, I think we should have this inside the user profile. We have the not found, and inside that we have the not found dot we have the JSX dot we have the JSX like that. And let's move on. So we have the RAFCE over there. The not found can contain a couple of items. Like first we have the div, and after that now what we can do. So inside this div we can have the class name first. We have the class name of we can have the not. So we have the user not found, and inside that what we can do is we can first display an icon. So we can have the cross icon over there. So we have the cross, we can display this type of icon. We can just copy, we can just paste it out here. Then we should have a link as well. So what after that, now what I'm gonna do is after this div, then first we can render this icon, cross circle. We can have this size property as well to the 30 to increase the size. Then we can have an h3 as well. The h3 could be we can have the user, we have the not found, or we can have the try again. So we can have the try again like that over there. And after that the h3, then we should have a link tag. So we should have the link from the React DOM like that. We should have the link over there. So we can import that. We can have the import something from we have the React DOM. That should be we have here the link over there. So with this link, now what we will do. So here we have the link. So below that now we can have, first we need to define the to tag over there. So we have the to, that should be we can again have the home page. So we should be moved on to the home page, and then we can have the try again from we have the home. Try again from home page like that. We have the try again from home page. And after that now we can have some styles for these as well. So let's move on inside the user. So inside the user.css, let's move on. Let's define the styles for that. We have the not found here, the user not found over there. We can have the styles over there, the user not found. Then we can move on. We can have a, suppose we can have the display, that should be we can have the flex over there. We can have the flex direction of the column, align items, that could be center. We can have the the justify of the center again. Then we can move on. Then after that we can have a for the user not found title like that. The title, that could be we can have the font family, that could be we can have the monospace like that. The font size could be again 24 pixels would be enough. Then what we can do, then we can have the link as well. For we have the nav link, we have the user dash nav link over there, user not found dash nav link over there like that. So it should contain a couple of items. Like first we can have the text decoration of none to remove the styles. We can have the font weight as well, that could be somewhere around, we can have the bolder over there like bold. We can have the display again, that could be we can have again, we can have the flex over there. We have the flex direction over there, and flex direction could be again we can keep it to row. Then we can move on. We have the justify content, that should be inside the center. Align items, that should be again inside the center. And that's it, I think for now. That's it. So now let's move on. Let's give these classes as well. So the class name, then we have the user not found of the title. We can give that class name to this. Class name of this. Then we have the user not found of the nav link like that. We have the class name to the nav link like that. And inside that now we can again have the arrow sign of the back. So we can search for the back arrow sign over there. So we can search, suppose for this, we can just copy that over there. So we can paste it out here. inside the not found, and here inside this link, first we can render that MD outline, anything after that. We can have the size, or we have the 30 over there. Then what we can do is then we can have the try again from home page like that. So now, when do we want to render the not found? When? So we want to render this not found when the user is not there. So let's move on to the user. So here we have a condition. Once we have the user, then only we want to handle the user profile. So we can have the question mark over there. Once we have the user, then we want to do this, or else we can have the not found like that. We have the not found page. So that's how it's gonna work. So there we go. You can see now we can display the user not found, try again, and here we have the try again from the home page, and it's looking great. So once we hit on that, so you can see now we are into the home page of the application. So if we search for any different user like that, so if we hit on the search, the user not found, try again. So you can see it's looking great over there. It's looking great. I think we can just have the different color for the link. I think different color for the link. So user.css, we have here the nav link type of thing, right? We have here the color that should be according, that should be this, like, no, color should be according to the theme, or we can define the same color of this. So we can move on. We can have here the app, sorry, we have the header.css, we have this color, we have this color for this as well, we have this color, we can have the font weight as well. I think we already have that. No, we already have that. So we have this color. You can say try again from home page. Final property could be, we can have the font size could be 30 pixels for that. You can say try again from home page. You can see everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So with this step, you can see now we completed this application. You can say it is looking great. And if we accidentally move on to user slash anything after that, you can see now we would be having the page not found. And if we move on to slash user slash anything after that, you can see now we have the user not found. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine from our application. So it's looking great. So the first step of this project is completed. You can see congratulations on completing this huge step. So we created a lot of the things with that. We created multiple pages and all. So let's wrap up with that. So now we completed this project. Right, now we completed this project, a GitHub user search application with using the context and with using the router. So it was a great application, right? Because you learned a lot of new things with how to implement the router in the real world applications, how to use the context of the React, and we had a good practical example of these concepts. And now we need to see a thing. So if we move on to this application here, you can see here what we did is we used a custom context for some modules. Like for the theme module, we use the custom context, and for handling the users, we handled with a custom context. So React context is great for that, but there are some limitations. So let's move on. So what are the limitations with the context? So the context API is great, but we have some limitations. So we don't have any global state management. So if we again move on to this application, here you can see first we have the context of the theme provider, then we have the users provider, and then we are wrapping the app. And in future, there can be the different scenario in which there can be multiple modules, like for the shopping cart application, there could be multiple modules of handling the cart, handling the products, handling the orders and all. So context can be suitable for that as a container for a module. So suppose this theme is a module, so context can be used as a theme container, right? Then we have the users provider, so it can be used as a users provider. So we don't have the global state management. So sometimes we need the global state management inside real world applications. So if you take the example of Amazon, so we have some global state of how the user is being interacted, how users can see those products, how user can add the shopping cart, and all of the things with that. So we don't have the global state management. with the help of context. And also, it doesn't provide a reliable way of managing the complex states, right? So again, if we move back, you can see, if we move on to the users provider, you can see what do we have here. So we just have the normal React component, which is sharing the state to multiple components of the same module. So you can see here we are managing the state with the React's use state, nothing else. And there we go, we have the functions. We can update the state according to these functions, and we share these values to the children components of this module. Like suppose the modules where we see the user, we share the same state to solve the props drilling. But here you can see here we don't have any efficient way of handling the state. Suppose if you have the state of managing a game, then it would be pretty difficult with using the use state and effects of the React. So it would be pretty difficult. So for those things, we need to use the DSAs, right? The data structures and algorithms. So we use that because for those complex applications, we can't use and we can't rely on the React's use state and use effect operations. And again, it can be used as a wrapper for components to solve the props drilling for a particular module. So it can be used as a wrapper. So wrapper can be used to wrap a module, and it can wrap multiple components to solve the props drilling. So we already know about the props drilling, that one component sends some props to the deep level, to the deep nested level. So with that, React context can solve that problem single-handedly. So it can win anytime with that. But for having the global state management and the complex state management, we can't use the context. So what should we use instead? Again, the Redux, right? So we should use the Redux for the complex state management with the JavaScript applications. So let's see what is the Redux. So it is just a state management library. That's it. So Redux is a state management library for JavaScript applications here. So it can help you manage the complex state in your application. So suppose you have the complex states, you can again use your DSS skills to manage the complex state of your application. And it can be used with any JavaScript application. So Redux is not limited to React or any front-end application. So Redux can be used wherever the JavaScript is. So it can be used with any JavaScript application that you want to run. And it follows a CDS pattern, which is a central data store. So again, if we move back to the main.jsx, you can see here we have a couple of states like that, the theme provider, the users provider, and we can have more modules if we have a real world application. So suppose an application like Google, there could be multiple modules like YouTube, handling the Chrome's data, handling the assistant and all. So there can be multiple modules regarding that. So we should follow a central data store. There should be only one store of your application. Only one store should be there which can handle everything of your application. And even if you want to use the context for some things, you can also use that. There are no conflicts with using the React context and with the Redux. You can use both. And it represents a single source of truth. So with the help of CDS, a central data store, so one application can have only one state. That's it. So that's why we have only single source of truth. We can get the data from only one store from the Redux because it provides us a store where the state is managed. So we have the single source of truth where we can get the data and where we can manage our application. And it synchronously updates the state. So the Redux uses the synchronous operations to update the state, and we can also use the async operations with the Redux as well, but for that we need to use thunks, and we will see that in a moment. So for now, that is the Redux, that how the Redux works and what is the Redux. So this is all about what is the Redux. So the summary for this is Redux is not just can be used with the React, it can be used with any JavaScript application which can manage the complex state, a difficult state to be managed. So the Redux can manage that state for you. And another thing to note, that Redux does not mutate the state, right? It does not mutate the state. What it does, it it creates a copy of a state, right? It creates a new copy of that state that we can use. So once the state is declared, it is the permanent state, and every time we need to update something, we create a copy of a new state with the help of Redux, and that copy is being shared as a snapshot to all of those components. And also, where the state has been changed, the Redux also manages and persists those state inside our applications, and it also forces the React application where the state has been changed, so the React application could be re-rendered. So this is everything about the Redux. So there are some terms regarding the Redux. So before using the Redux, there are some terms that needs to be addressed. So first term is the actions. So actions are a way to describe that what happened in an application. So they are the plain JavaScript object that describes the changes inside the application state. So we already discussed about the actions inside the use reducer hook of the React in the phase 1 of our tutorial, right? You remember? We've used some of the actions to say that what happened, like whenever the user interacted or whenever something happened, a new state has been changed, we pass and we dispatch some actions to the Redux. And actions have a type property including that what happened during that state operation or anything like that, or any user interaction. So we have a type property and some payload data inside that action to tell the Redux that what happened during this time. And we have the concept of the reducers, right? We already use the reducer inside the use reducer hook inside the React. So again, it's a logical function to update the state based on the actions. So once we fire the action, then the actions tells us that what happened, then reducers move on and updates the state based on the particular action which is received. So they are pure functions that specify that how the application state changes in response to actions. So they take the current state and the action and returns a newly copied state that can be shared across the components. And we have the store, which holds the entire state of your application. So it allows all of the components to manage and access the state, and it can also helps us to dispatch the actions and registers the listeners and all. So it's all about the Redux. Like, these are the terms for the Redux. These are the main terms, like the actions, reducers, and the store. And now what we can do for implementing the Redux inside our application. So let's move on to the Google and find about the Redux, that what is the Redux. So again, it's a predictable state container for JavaScript applications. So it can help you write the applications that behave consistently, run in different environments and all. You can also use the Redux in client, server applications as well, and native applications as well. It's a centralized, so your application state is being centralized over there. We have a state persistent option over there, and it is debuggable. So you can also debug certain operations with the Redux as well. So there is also a Chrome extension for that, and it is a flexible for any UI layer. So the Redux team has two libraries. First is the React Redux. So it is officially for the React, for adding some bindings for the React over there. And there's another library of the Redux Toolkit, which is a modern, and it is also the official library of the Redux. So Redux Toolkit offers you to add the modern way of how we manage the state. So the Redux is, this Redux library is a synchronous library, but with the help of the Redux toolkit, we can have some async operations through middlewares and some thunks. So these both are managed by the Redux team. So there is no third party person access over there. And the Redux toolkit allows you to have more powerful approach of handling the state inside the React application. So we'll be moving on with the Redux toolkit, and although it is almost same, So what we can do here, we can just click on the get started over there. So you can see this package is intended to be the standard way of how we write the Redux logic, and it was originally created to help address three common concerns about the Redux, like configuring a Redux store was too complicated. So if we move back to the Redux again, you can see if we move back to the Redux and click on the get started, so that was the preferred way of handling the reducer functions over there, right? So if we move on to the examples, so this was the example earlier with using the Redux. You can see we imported the create store from the Redux. So create store helps us to create a store for the Redux, a store for our complete application. And you can see a counter reducer. So it looks similar, right? Because we use the use reducer hook. It looks similar for that. We have the switch action.type and we have the state and all of the things with that. And we manage the multiple cases over there like increment, decrement, and all. So we already use that. So in the Redux, it was also same like counter reducer, and then we created a store that could be a create store with a counter reducer. And then we subscribe for the store to get the latest state updates. Then we dispatch some actions like that. So this was good for very basic applications, but for handling the large scale applications, this approach was a bit complicated. I'll not say a bit, it was very complicated because I also worked in a complex project where we used this Redux, this package of the Redux, and we were confused as hell that why we are using the Redux. We should also use the React, but with the launch of the Redux toolkit, it was very easy. So with the Redux toolkit, we again break the Redux into multiple pieces. So if we move on to the Excel drawer over there, if we move on here, so if we remove everything with that, so what we do is here, suppose we have this application and here we have the central data store for that, which manages everything of your application. So inside this also, what we did with the Redux toolkit is we created suppose we created some slices. So it could be a new slice, it could be the new slice. So slice are just modules, are the separate modules, like the application can have the products, e-commerce application can have the products, the orders, the users, the products, there can be the authentication and all. So there are multiple modules. So this is also we have some slices. So that could be the slice for anything, that could be the slice of anything, and these are anything. And then after all that, then what we do is we just manage that in its own way, right? So then we manage that in a round way like this. So that is the complete store for our application. And here we manage all these states. So with the help of Redux toolkit, we create multiple slices inside that as well. And then we can manage all of that with the help of Redux. And now let's move on. Let's remove that as well. So now we need to create the Redux application. That's it. And now what we need to do is we need to install this npm package at the Redux.js toolkit. So we can install that. And if we are using it with the React, then we need the React Redux. That's it. So here first we can move on to the GitHub user search. Then we can install the Redux. We have the npm install, we have at the Redux.js toolkit, and we also need to install the React Redux. So this manages the state, and this helps us to use the Redux state across React application. So we can copy that and we can paste it out over there like this. So we can just hit enter, and after all that, the Redux would be installed in our system. So after that, you can see here we have a function of the create slice. So it is a function that accepts an initial state. So first we provide the initial state to a slice. Like first we have this function, the create slice. So this is how we can create a new slice for a new module. So create slice, suppose that could be for the counter. Then we share the initial state like this. We share the initial state. Then we have the reducers like that. We have the reducer that could be the increment. So earlier the reducers were like we use the switch statements like that. We use the switch over there. But now here what do we have is we have some functions directly that we can call, like increment, decrement, increment by amount, And you can see inside each function there are two parameters. The first parameter is the state, the last state snapshot, and the second parameter is the action. So there we have the action, over there. We can update the state according to this action. And the last thing to mention over there before we move on to the practical example is there you can see what we are doing is we are just mutating the state. But here inside the official Redux application, we didn't mutate the state. So what we did was we returned a new copy of object, a new copy of state. But here we are returning and we are mutating the state because this library, the Redux toolkit, uses a package immer. So it uses a package called immer with that, the immer over there. So it allows you to have the immutable state in a more convenient way. So what it does is with this code, we think that we are updating the state, but with the help of the immer, we are not actually mutating the state. So there is some internal algorithm for that. We are not updating the state directly. So this Redux toolkit uses that. So here as well, we are not mutating the state. So after we call this decrement, so some internal algorithms will gonna run and it will just create a new copy of that state. That's it. So now let's move on to our application directly. So here you can see the Redux has been installed. And now what do we want to do here? So inside the source, we should have only one central state. So we can define a function like store of the Redux. So now we have the Redux store. Then what we can do, we can have the index.js like that. And for managing the folder structures, we should create multiple slices in different files. So that could be, we can have a theme slice dot we have the JS. So we are creating the slice for the theme. So theme would be very basic example like the counter, like how the counter works. So the theme works same. We just update and decrease the value of that counter. We can use that with a theme. So first thing first, what we need to do, we can import something from, that could be from @Redux.js toolkit. So first thing that we want to do is we want to import the function of create slice. So we create a slice, a piece of state with that. So let's declare a slice. So we can have the const, that could be the theme slice like that, and that could be the create slice like that. That could be the create slice. And here we need to provide the options. So if you press Ctrl and space, you can see first property that we have is the initial state. So we can have the initial state. So every state application has the initial state, so we can provide that. We can declare that as well, like initial state. That could be, if we move on to what we did inside the context, if we move on to this theme provider, we use the mode value. So we can have the mode, that should be, we can have here the light like that. We have the mode of light. And then we have the initial state, that could be the initial state. So we don't even need to provide that. And then we need to provide a unique name for each slice. So here what we can do, we can again use the theme slice like that, and that's it. And then what we want to do is here we have the reducers. So here we have the reducers. So with the reducers, there would be a function of managing the state. Like there could be we can have the toggle theme like that. So there could be a toggle theme function, and that's it. So inside the toggle theme, we have this state. Right here we have the state over there. So state is the actual state which we have defined over there, like the mode of light. And here what we can do, we just mutate the state. So we can have the state. So here we have the mode. That should be, we can just provide some conditions over there. And here we can also use the if else statements as well. So we have the state.mode equals to, we can have if the mode, we can have if the state.mode equals to, we have the light like that, equals to the light. Then we are gonna do it as we can have the dark, or else again we will be having here, we can have the light like that. So here we have the light. So that's how we can do that. So here we are updating the state, and we can also update something if we move on to the theme provider. So we are doing that as well, right? We are doing that. So we should also use that, because whenever we call the toggle theme, So this should also be called. So here we can have the state dot, we have the mode like that. That's it. So after we update the state and then only we should do it, right? So then according to that, we can also change the document.body.class name, and that's it. So now we have the theme slice, and for the basic slice, like for the basic state management, like for the mode and all these things, we can just use this piece and that's it. We don't need to extend something over now. And now what do we want to do is we can export this theme slice. That's it. We can export this theme slice over there and that's it, like that. And now what do we want to do is now we can move on to the index.js. So inside the index.js, we need to configure a store. Here you can see here we are declaring the slices over there, the slices over pizza. But here we need to declare the full pizza and then we need to tell from where you can get that part of state or that part of slice. So we need to import something from, so here we can have at the rate Redux.js toolkit. And after that, what do we want to do? Is we want to import something which is a configure store. So configure store is just a create store again. It's a normal Redux create store. So it creates a store. So let's move on. Let's just use a store. So we can have the const store that should be equals to, we can have the configure store like that. So we have the configure store. And after that, here we need to provide the reducers. So reducers are the logics to update the state, and we need to provide the reducers, the overall reducers of our application. So here in this application, there would be multiple reducers, the overall reducers. I'm talking about the overall reducers. So there are the reducers for the theme and the user. So what we can do, we can have the object over there. Then we can have for the theme, that could be, we can have the theme slice, we can import the theme slice dot, we can have the reducer. So we can tell the overall store that the reducer for the theme is, we have the theme slice dot reducer property like that. And then after that, that's it. So after that, now what do we want to do? So if we want to call these functions inside that, so you can see if we want to call this toggle theme, now we cannot call this directly. So these are the actions, right? Inside the reducers, these are the actions, like whatever something happened inside this application. So we store all of them as a functions. So we just also export these actions. So we can have the const like that. We have the theme actions like that. So we have the theme actions. That could be, we can have the theme slice dot, we can have the actions property. So these are the actions with that, like the toggle theme here. Then we just export the theme actions as well, and that's it. That's it for the theme. Like you can see here we have the actions, and here we have the main reducer for that. So reducer registers the overall reducer that this theme slice can be used with overall state management. And now we just export default the store, and that's it. So with the help of this, you can see with only this type of code, we haven't used any React's official use state, effect, or any hook. We just use the normal JavaScript with that and with the Redux syntax. And now what do you want to do? Now we have here this store. Now we should be having a global overall provider for that store. So you can see here we have multiple providers like theme provider, user provider, but with the Redux, we only have one provider. That's it. We can move on to the main.jsx over there. Now, what we can do is we can move on to the top, and here we can have the provider like that. We can have the provider, and we need to import the provider directly from a package which we installed with the React, which was the React Redux. So we use a package of the React Redux, which enables us to use the bindings of the Redux to the React. So we can have a move on. We can move on and we can import the provider, as we can have the Redux provider like that. We can have the Redux provider like that. We have provider as the Redux provider. Then we can move on. So here we have the Redux provider. And after that, we can wrap the complete application with that. We can wrap the complete application with that. And now you can see, now inside that we need to provide a property which is the store. So we can provide the store property, and store is the actual store, whatever we just created. So we created this with a configure store. We can just provide a store like that. We can import that, import store, and we gave it to the provider, and that's it. You can see that's how simple it is to manage the state with the React. And now we can get rid of the theme provider as well. So we can get rid of the theme provider. So let's test our application and let's see that how we can use that. We can remove the theme provider from there. And now what do we want to do? Now let's see that where we are using the theme. So if we move on to the app.jsx, here we have the layout, and again we can move on to the app.jsx, we can move on to the pages. So the toggle theme is mainly used with the header. So right, we can move on to the header. So here you can see here we use the use theme over there. We use the use theme. So here we won't be using the use theme because now we are not using the context. So we can remove this theme over there like this. We can remove that, the theme things. And once if we just run this application, we have the npm run dev. You can see now this is open in 5173. So if we open that, you can see search any GitHub user. Once we click on the switch, nothing is gonna happen. And now what do you wanna do? So here with the React Redux package, we have something called use selector hook. So if we move on to, we have the React Redux. So we have something called use selector. We can import that. We can have the use selector like that, and the use selector grabs the state. So with the help of use selector, we grab the state and then we update something inside our application. So again, as per the rules of hook, what do you want to do? We can first give a reference of the use selector. So either what we can do is we can grab the state itself. So we can have the theme like that. We have the theme. We have the theme state that could be equals to the use selector, and inside the use selector we have a callback function. So we need to provide the callback function, and here we have the state. So inside the callback, this state that we have over there, this state is the actual state of your application. So this state is the actual state of your application, and inside that what we gonna do? So again, if we move on to the index.js, you can see this is the actual state of our application, and inside there we have the theme. So we have the reducer of the theme, then we can grab, we can have the state over there, dot, we can have the theme like that, and that's it. So here we have the theme over there, and now we have the theme state over there. And if we just log the theme state over there like this, we have the theme state, then what is gonna happen? So we are gonna get the value of the theme. We are gonna get the value of the state of the theme, like mode of the light or mode of the dark. So if we move on to the inspect panel inside the console, you can see here we have the object. So there we go. Here we have the mode property, which is the light, and here as well we have the mode property of the light. You can see that's how it works. Right now we have the initial state of the light. If we change the initial state to, suppose we can have the dark, then we would be getting the mode equals to the dark, and that's it. You can see that's how easy it is to use the Redux over there. So with the help of, suppose if we move on, so with the help of the use selector, this is the overall state, and these are the properties that we have defined over there. So we have defined the property of the theme, so we can get that with this theme. And now you can see now we have the value of the theme state. Right now we have the value of the theme state. But how can we trigger this function? How can we trigger? Let me first remove all these things. But now how can we trigger this toggle function? How can we trigger that? So we use the dispatch, right? Inside the use reducer hook, we use the dispatch. So we dispatch some action. So we dispatch something to the Redux, that what happened. So for that we use something again from the React Redux, which is a dispatch. So there is a hook inside the React Redux, which is a use dispatch. So with the help of this, you can see a hook to access the Redux dispatch function. So we dispatch the action that what happened. So let's move on. So here we can again have the reference of, we have the dispatch over there, And that should be, we can have the use dispatch like that. We have the use dispatch over there. And after that, on the handle theme change, we just need to dispatch an action. We just need to dispatch an action. And from where we can get the action? We can get the action from this, from the theme actions, right? So we have already exported the theme actions. We can use that over there. We can have the theme actions dot, we have a function of the toggle theme. That's it. So here we have the dispatch theme actions dot toggle theme. So what it will do is it will just toggle the theme of our application. So let's see what happens if we refresh. We have already added that inside the handle theme change. So let's see what happens. So there again we have the light, but if we again click on this switch, you can see now we have the dark mode, right? So if we again refresh, now we wanna fix that. So initially the document.body doesn't have any style. So here, there's another thing that we can do. So suppose we have the mode of light at the initial state. So we can already use that initial state inside the main file. So inside the main.jsx, so it renders once. So we have the main.jsx. Then what we can do is we can just have the document.body.className equals to the light mode. And that's it. So this is for a custom purpose because we have customizations inside this application. So you can see now we have the theme slice, we have the mode of light, and here as well we have the mode of light. So if we refresh, now we have the light. If we click on the switch, now we have the dark. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine inside our application. You can see with the help of Redux, now we managed to get the state and to toggle the theme of our application. So congratulations on completing first application with the Redux. So now we completed that. You can see now we completed the theme slice. So now we replaced the theme provider with our application. So now what do you want to do? So now what we can do over there is now we should also replace the user provider. Right, now we should replace the user provider over there. But this is a complex task. Why? Because here we have the asynchronous function of fetching the user. Right, and for having the asynchronous operations with the Redux, what we have is we have the RTK query. We have the RTK query over there inside that. So with the help of the Redux Toolkit query, the RTK query, we can manage the asynchronous operations. So what do we want to do over there? So we have a function which is this. We have the createAsyncThunk API. So you can see what we have. You can see inside the createAsyncThunk, we create the Redux sections which are asynchronous like this. You can see first we create a thunk. So what is a thunk? So thunk is a function that accepts a Redux action, a type string and a callback function, and it should return a promise. So thunk returns a promise, and then we can manage the state according to that. You can see first inside the createAsyncThunk, we have to provide a unique name for anything like fetch user by ID. We can have users fetch user by ID like that. Then we have the async operation for that. We have the user ID number, we have the thunk API like that. Then what do you want to do? The main thing is this is the parameter of a function that we can use. Then what do we want to do? Then we can have the const response equals to this. Then we can just return the data of that response. But how we can manage the internal state? So this is like fetching the data from an API, but how to manage the user state for our application? So it is very simple. So again, you can see we have the initial state, and inside that we can have a state like entities or loading over there like that. And then we add another property which is the extra reducers. So we add the another property of the extra reducers, and this is a callback function. So extra reducer is a callback function with having a builder. So this is a builder, this is actually a query builder for our application. So this builder adds some cases. So we add some cases like builder.addCase, and that could be this functions, this thunk, that could be the states of this thunk. So you can see we can add this thing like builder.add case. So fetch user by ID. So when it is fulfilled, then what do you want to do? So first parameter is the type of the case. Then the second parameter is again the main reducer. Again the main reducer, the state and the action. Then we can update the state according to that action. So as of now, it will look a bit complicated, but let's simplify all of that. So let's work with the createAsyncThunk, and after that, after this tutorial, we will also work on the main RTK query tutorial. So the RTK query uses the createAsyncThunk. So createAsyncThunk is not the RTK query, but RTK query uses this internally, sorry. So createAsyncThunk is a thunk of the Redux that can be used, but the RTK query can be used for data fetching, caching solution for the Redux applications, and it eliminates the need to write any thunk, like for managing the data fetching, but it can also be used for various purposes. So there are a lot of advantages of using the createAsyncThunk, and all of the modern applications use that and that as well, because again no technology is perfect, so there could be some limitations with this as well and with this as well. So let's work with the createAsyncThunk first. So what do you want to do is, here you can see here we had the users provider. So again we can move on to the theme slice. Sorry, we need to create a new slice, right? So I forgot that, so I'm a bit confused with that. So let's create a new slice, a new piece of state. That could be, we can have the user slice like that dot, we have the JS. So let's create a new slice, so you can also try on your own as well. So we can have the const, we can have here, we can have the user slice like that. That could be equals to, we can have the create slice over there again. And again we can also provide some initial state, so we can have the const initial state like that, and that could be a state. And here we can also manage the loading state as well. So here we can have the loading, that should be, we can have a false or true like that. So initially what we can do, we can manage the loading state, like we can have, suppose we can have the idle like that, we can have the idle, then we can move on. So what we can do, so then we can manage the user property over there. So initially the user could be the null, that's it. And now what do we want to do? Now we have the create slice. So first we can define a unique name. The name could be, we can have the user slice like that. So we can have the same name of the user slice. You can name whatever you want, but it should be unique. And then what do we want to do? We can have the initial state. So it is already passed now. Then here we don't need to write any reducer. So here we don't need to write any reducer. There would be the extra reducers. So we'll be having some extra reducers, but before that, we need to create a thunk for that. So we can have the thunk. So let's define that thunk. So what do we want to do? So we can define it here only. So we can have the const, and here what we can do, here we have the fetch user by ID. We can use the same. We can have the const fetch user by ID equals to, we can have the create async thunk over there. We can import that. We can have the create async thunk like that, like this. So that should be a create async thunk over there. And inside that, the first parameter could be a string, a prefix for this. So we can have the const, we can have the fetch, suppose we have the user, then we can have the by, then we can have the ID. That should be equals to this string only. So we have the fetch user by ID like that. Should be the fetch, and it should also be the fetch. So it is a constant, so that's why I am giving a value like this. So we have a fetch user by ID. That should be first, we can have the fetch user by ID. And this is also being used. So I'm declaring this as a constant variable because we'll be exporting that and we need to dispatch this action. So after that, now we have the fetch user by ID, and the second parameter over there, second argument, could be the payload creator, the main function. So this is a callback function for that. So here let's see that how they have managed it. So that was async function. So we can use that. So we can have it as a async over there. Then we can move on inside that. We should have a parameter. We should have the user ID. So here as well, we'll be having the user ID like that. And after that, what do we want to do? So inside the next parameter, we have the Thunk API builder. We have the Thunk API like that. We have the Thunk API builder. So we can have the Thunk API builder. Includes a lot of functions. So if you remove that, if you add the object and control space, you can have a lot of the things like you have the abort, dispatch, the extra, the fulfill with value, get state and all. You can also get current state. You can dispatch another action. You have the request ID, reject, fulfilled and all. So there are a lot of the things that we can use with the Thunk. So that's why Thunk is very useful for modern applications. So here, what do you want to do inside that? So here we can again move on to the user's provider over there. So there we had the base URL. Again, we can get the base URL over there here. So we can have the base URL like that, or we can export this base URL somewhere. So inside the source, we can have a folder. We have the utils, and inside that we can have a new file that could be constant store. We have the JS, and that could be this base URL. So let's move on with the user slice over there. So first we can have this constant over there, the fetch user by ID. We can have the export over there like that. Then we can move on and we can move on to the users provider. We can get this as well, the base URL. We can paste it out here. And now comes the most interesting part, that how we can manage all that. We have the export const the base URL, and how we can manage that with the user slice, how we can manage. So here we have the base URL. We don't need to use that. So if we again move on to the users provider, you can see here, first we check with the try catch block. So again, we can have the try catch here. So here we can have the try catch. The similar pattern should be followed over there like this. So we can have const response equals to this. We can have your, suppose we can have the const response that should be equals to await. Then we can have the fetch of the JavaScript. Then simple. Then again, we need to create a dynamic URL. Then we can get this constant property of the base URL. We have something like we have the base URL over there like this. Then we can have the user ID after the slash. Then we can have the user ID that we are importing from this function. And after that, it returns a response. So first we can have the data from that, the const data that should be a wait. Then we can have the response.json. We can convert the response into the JSON format. And after that, we can move on. We can have the return of the data. And inside the catch, if we get an error, then what we can do is we can move on. We can log that error. We can log the error over there. And after that, you can see there we added another condition. There we added another condition if we have the data.login, and then only we want to do that. If we have the data.login over there, then only we want to do that. So what we can do over there, then we can check if we have the data dot we have the login over there, then only we want to perform something. Else we again move on to the catch block like that. Else we can again move on. So here you can see inside that Thunk API. So we had the Thunk. So what we can do over there is here, once we have the data, then we can have the Thunk API dot we can have the fulfill with value. Then we can fulfill this promise with some value, and the value could be we can have the data like that. So here we have the data, and then what we want to do, if we don't have the data.login, then we can have again the Thunk API, then we can have the reject with value. Because now we want to reject the promise, we can have the reject with value, and the value could be again, we can send the data over there. Because if we have the login, then it is successful. If we don't have the login property, then we want to reject this promise. And after that, if we get an error, then again, we want to reject like that. Then we can have a reject with value like that. Again, we have the reject. We can just return that like this. We can have return reject with value. Then we can use the same return statement over there as well. So that's how we can create this function over there like this. You can see it was very easy to write, and it is very similar to what we did inside the provider. We have the try catch block. Here what we are doing is we are returning some value like reject the promise, and here fulfill the promise, and that's it. And here again, let's move back to the user slice. You can see here we have the loading property of the idle, and here we have the user property of the null. So let's move on and let's see what should we do next. So here we did that, we need to add the extra reducers. So let's add that. So after the user, we can add the extra reducers over there. Sorry, we should add it here. Let's manage some code and we can use by the constants. And after that, here we have the create slice. And here we need to add the extra reducers. So here, what do we want to do? So extra reducers is a callback function. So we have a callback and in there we have a builder. So here we have the builder like this, and inside the builder, now what we can do over there. So inside the builder, we have some states. So let's see that how we can do that. So we add some cases for that. So here like this, we can have the builder dot, we can have the add case like that, fetch user by ID, this action creator. Then we can have the states like if the promise is pending, if the promise is rejected, settled, and if the promise is fulfilled. So suppose if the promise was rejected, so then what do we want to do over there? Then inside that you can see the second parameter over there is we can have the state, then we can have the action like that. And after that, now what we can do? Very simple. So here what we are doing is we are having a builder, add case, we are adding the case of the rejected. So there you can see we had some cases like fulfill and the reject. So here we can handle the rejected state. We add the cases, the state and the action property. So here what we can do, we can have the state dot loading equals to, we can have the done like that, we can have the done, and we can have the state dot user equals to, we can have the action dot payload property. That's it. So that's it. So what we did is we add the builder dot add case, then we have the fetch user by ID, rejected. Sorry, it should be the fulfilled like that. It should be the fulfilled. So we have the fulfilled case over there, and inside the fulfilled, it means like the loading is done, and we have the state dot user equals to action dot payload. And then we will be adding another case. We can have the builder dot add case. That could be, we can have on. We have the fetch user by ID. That should be for. We can have the rejected. So once that was rejected, then what we need to do over there, we can again have the callback function over there. We have the state, then we have the action over there. Then once the promise was rejected, we can have the state dot loading again equals to, we can have the idle again, the idle. Then we can have the state dot user, that should be again, we can have the null value over there. We can have the state dot user equals to, we have the null. And after that, if it is pending, then what we can do, we have the builder dot add case. If it is something like we have the pending, then what we can do, we have the loading is equals to, we have the pending like that. We have the pending over there. And that's it. You can say that's it. That's how we want to do that. And here we don't even need to update the user. So you can see that's how we can do that over there. You can say it was very simple with the help of extra reducers. There was a builder which adds the cases over there of this, of our function of the fetch user by ID. And now let's move on to our application and let's replace that with this. Now again, what we can do over there, we can just export all of these things. We can have the export, the user slice over there. We can also export the actions. We can have const. We can have the slice sections. Actions, that could be, we can have the user slice dot actions like that. We can also export that. The user slice sections over there. Then we can also export the fetch user by ID action creator. So we can also export that. Then what we can do, now we can again move on to the index.js. Here we only had the theme. Now we should have here for the users as well, GitHub user, and that should be for, again, we can have here the user slice like that. Dot, we can have the reducer. So that's it like that. So that's it. That's how we want to do that. And now what we can do over there is, now what we can do over there, now we can test it out. Now we already have this provider. So if we move on to suppose the main.jsx, now we already have this Redux provider at the top. So we don't even need the user provider once again. We can remove that, and we can also remove it from here as well. And let's manage it out. So here you can see now what we have is we just have either strict mode, then we have the Redux provider, the browser router for adding the routing, and that's it. Now, if we move on to this application, we won't be seeing anything inside the users. If we move on, if we search for any user, then we would be getting the errors like user not found or all things like that. Then what we want to do is now we want to replace that context with the Redux. So that would be very simple. So let's move on to the users.jsx. So here what we can do. So here we can first remove the use GitHub user context over there. We can remove that, the const user property with that. So instead, now what we can do, so we can have the const, the user, that should be again, we can have the use selector over there, the use selector from the React Redux. Then again, we can have the callback for the state. Then we can have the state dot. So what we did the GitHub user. We have the state.github user, and from that we will be accessing the user property. There was a user and there was the loading, and that's how we want to do that. We can also add the console.log of the user. So initially you can see now we had the null property of the user. So once we hit on this search bar, now we want to move on to the search bar. So let's move on to the search bar over there. We have the index.jsx. So here what we want to do is now we don't want to use that. We can remove that fetch user. And after that, we can also remove this use GitHub user context. We can remove that. So here what we want to do here is very simple. So instead of the fetch user, we can just directly call that action creator, the fetch user by ID. And that's it. So let's move on again to, suppose if we move on to this, the user.jsx. So here we have the fetch user by ID. I want to import that, and that's it. So let's see what happens. So we made a silly mistake because now we haven't used the dispatch. So we also needed to use the dispatch to dispatch an action. We can again use something. We have the import something from that could be equals to, we can have the React Redux over there. We can use the dispatch like that. We have the use dispatch over there like that. So here we again need to use the dispatch. We can have the const. We can have the dispatch like that. So that we can have the use dispatch over there, the use dispatch. Then finally here we want to dispatch this action. We have the dispatch over there. We can dispatch this action like that. And let's see what happens now. So if we move on to our application again, if we move on, if we refresh, if we again search for nickel, so then like that, if we click on this search, you can see now everything seems to be working perfectly fine. You can see now we are having some actions as well. So everything seems to be working fine. We are getting the same response. We just can move back. We can refresh our application. We can move back again. We have the try again from home page. We can again search for any user, like we can have the NASA like that. We can hit on this. You can see now we got that. You can see everything seems to be working perfectly fine. We can also search for, suppose, the free code camp as well. Free code camp like that. Let's just hit on this. You can see now we would be getting that. Now we have the free code camp over there. So everything seems to be working fine. So you can see our application looks great and it is working totally fine over there. So with this step, now we completed this application. You can see now we completed that and it was working totally fine over there. Right, it is working totally fine. We already used the context API, we used the Redux as well. And what left is notifications. So now we are not gonna implement that. So we can implement it later inside our complex projects, inside the real world projects. But for now, you can see for now we completed this course. Now we completed the React phase 2 as well. So that was the phase 2 of the React tutorial, where we managed multiple states using the context, using the Redux, multiple more libraries using that. You can say it was very fun doing all these things. It was very fun creating this application as well. Suppose if we again search for anything like that, you can see even inside the dark mode, it was working perfectly fine. You can see now we completed this application. So congratulations on again completing the phase 2 of this course, right? So I worked a lot with that. I already spent a lot of my weekends on that, building this project and all. So congratulations. So you learned something. That's my prize and that's it. And now what do we want to do? Now we'll be moving on to the phase 3. And inside the phase 3, we have an amazing real world project with React. So, are you excited for that? Me too. So, I am also gonna upload that phase 3 as well as soon as possible. So, till then, stay tuned and stay reacted. So, thank you so much for the phase 2 and thank you so much for watching this content. And if you like this content, then please subscribe and please help me do a favor. Please like this video and please comment it out that we loved your course so that I should create more courses like that. So with this, so congratulations on completing the phase 2 and congratulations on completing the React. So now you have the knowledge on the React, right? Now you can apply for any job interviews as well. You can showcase them your skills and you can also build some projects on your own as well. So let's wait for the phase 3 with a real world project and with the advanced project. If I mean advanced, then it would be the advanced. So stay tuned for that. So thank you so much for this.